Today, we have 2 hours of theories about everyone who might have known Dexter's secret for you. Each section explores a theory, ordered from least to most believable. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and let's get started with, what if Rita knew Dexter was a serial killer?
If she ever sees me for who I really am.
Then what? You think I would leave?
Yes, absolutely.
For the first 4 seasons of Dexter, Rita was a huge part of his life. What started as a convenient cover for his double life as a serial killer gradually turned into something real, with Dexter genuinely caring for her and her kids, Aster and Cody. Tragically, before her shocking death at the hands of the Trinity Killer, Rita never knew the truth about Dexter's dark passenger, or the secret life that he was leading as a killer. But what if she found out? In this video, I'll explore whether Rita would have accepted or rejected Dexter if she ever discovered the truth. I'll examine both sides of the argument, considering the possibilities, before reaching a final conclusion on what she likely would have done. First, let's take a look at the evidence that Rita could have accepted Dexter and his life as a serial killer. In order to do that, we need to understand their family dynamic a little better. Before Dexter came into their lives, Rita and her children lived under the shadow of abuse. Her ex-husband, Paul Bennett, was a violent drug addict who terrorized their home, physically abusing Rita and manipulating her to maintain control. Even after their divorce, this presence loomed over her life, keeping her trapped in fear. Even though Rita escaped Paul and protected the kids, his absence left a void, not just as their partner, but for Aster and Cody, who no longer had a father figure. Dexter filled that void, offering stability and support. He was kind, funny, and patient, everything Paul wasn't. Rita, still healing from her past trauma, found comfort in his emotional detachment, mistaking it for stability and consistency. For the kids, Dexter became a source of security and warmth, even if his affection was, at times, performative.
Hi, Dexter.
May I say that you look lovely this evening?
Okay.
Master Cody, handsome as ever. High five.
Over time, his presence transformed from that of a boyfriend to a true father figure, particularly for Cody, who saw Dexter as his dad. By the end of season 4, Dexter had become the steady, caring presence Rita had always wanted. After years of living in fear with Paul, she finally built a life that felt safe, predictable, and secure. And Dexter was at the heart of that stability. He was dependable, consistent, and most importantly, nothing like Paul. That security wasn't just for her, but for the kids too. Aster and Cody had come to see Dexter as their father, and he filled that role without the violence, manipulation, or chaos that they had once known. If Rita discovered Dexter's secret, that stability wouldn't just vanish overnight. She would have already overlooked the odd inconsistencies in his behavior because, on the surface, he was everything she wanted. Reliable, calm, and always there for the family. Unlike Paul, who brought fear and chaos into their home, Dexter brought order and security. He made her feel safe, even if that safety was built on a horrifying truth. He was a serial killer. Walking away wouldn't be easy. Rita had fought too hard to escape her unstable past, and she wouldn't want to throw her family back into uncertainty. The life she had built with Dexter felt real to her, even if part of it was a lie. If accepting that truth meant keeping that security intact for herself and the kids, she might have chosen to live with the fact that the man she loved was a killer. On its own, this might not seem like the strongest reason, but once we explore the other factors, it becomes clear that the idea of Rita accepting Dexter and staying with him isn't actually all that far-fetched. The second reason Rita might have stayed is her deep empathy and capacity for forgiveness. She truly tried to understand people in her life, even when they were flawed. While I found her pretty annoying at times, at her core, she was a loving, empathetic person who always looked for the good in others. Throughout the series, Rita's empathy allowed her to forgive, even when Dexter made serious mistakes. A key example is how she handled his involvement with Paul. When Paul came back into Rita's life in season 1 episode 6, he was partly good, but mostly bad, and Dexter recognized this and didn't like it. One night, while Dexter was in the kitchen, Paul started antagonizing him, trying to assert dominance and get under his skin.
My heart beats for those 2 kids. So if you or that skinny bitch try to screw with what's mine, I swear to God, I don't care who I have to hurt.
Overcome with anger and a need to protect Rita, Dexter knocked Paul unconscious and seized the chance to remove him from their lives for good. Rather than simply leaving Paul incapacitated, Dexter took things a step further. He dragged Paul to a motel, injected him with heroin, and staged the scene to make it look like he had relapsed. Then, he called the police, ensuring Paul would be arrested and sent back to prison under the Florida's 3 strikes law. It was a calculated and ruthless move that protected Rita and the kids. But Paul wasn't fooled. He knew Dexter had set him up, and even from behind bars, he fought to prove it. Over time, he managed to plant a seed of doubt in Rita's mind, convincing her to search for evidence. When she eventually found Paul's missing shoe outside her house, exactly where he claimed Dexter had knocked him out, she was forced to confront the truth.
Look, if there is anything left between us, you will answer me this one question and you will tell me the truth. Are you an addict?
When Rita questioned Dexter, she wasn't just shocked by what he'd done, but by how effortlessly he'd done it. The cunning, the violence, the cold precision, it didn't align with the man that she thought she knew. And yet, when Dexter lied and claimed that he was a recovering drug addict to explain his actions, Rita chose to believe him. Instead of dwelling on the disturbing implications of what he had done to Paul, she accepted the lie, forgave him, and looked to help him recover. This is important as Rita seemed surprisingly unbothered by the extreme lengths Dexter went in order to get Paul sent back to prison. Rita's kindness and forgiving nature made her more willing to overlook the red flags. She barely questioned the violence and manipulation involved, and when Dexter claimed to be a recovering addict, she accepted it without much resistance. This was just as much about forgiveness as it was about holding on to the stability he provided. Again, she had fought too hard to escape her past and didn't want to throw her family back into uncertainty. She also didn't want to shatter the kid's image of him, and on some level, she may have even been drawn to the fact that Dexter was willing to go to such lengths to protect their family, something that Paul never did. It's also important to consider Rita's reaction to Paul's death. Despite everything he had done, his abuse, manipulation, and the fear that he brought into their home, she still felt genuinely upset, guilty, and emotional when he died. If she can find empathy for someone as harmful as Paul, it's not unreasonable to think that she could empathize with Dexter. Because unlike Paul, Dexter was not abusive, he cared for her and the kids, and even though he was a killer, he provided the love and stability her family had never known before. If Rita ever found out that Dexter was a serial killer, the same pattern of justification could come into play. Just as she forgave him for what he did to Paul and accepted the supposed drug addiction, she might find a way to empathize with the situation. After all, Dexter wasn't just any killer, he only targeted the bad people. He provided security, stability, and a loving home for her and the kids. In her eyes, that might be enough to at least consider looking past the truth rather than destroying the life they had built. That alone might have been enough for her to rationalize his darkness rather than turn away from him completely. Similarly, in season 2, Rita forgave Dexter for cheating with Lila. Despite the betrayal, she still saw him as a good man and chose to move past it. Beyond her own feelings, she considered Aster and Cody, not wanting them to lose another father figure. Instead of letting his actions break their family apart, she justified forgiving him and allowed them to move forward. Rita had a pattern of protecting Dexter's image, especially for the sake of the children. If she was willing to look past infidelity and significant violence, is it really that far-fetched to think that she might also overlook a deeper, darker secret? And this seemed even more believable when you consider the Code of Harry. At its core, the code dictated that Dexter only killed those who deserved it. Murderers, abusers, and criminals who had evaded justice. While Rita wasn't a violent person herself, there was evidence to suggest that she wasn't entirely opposed to violence when it served a purpose, particularly when it came to protecting her family. When Dexter framed Paul to remove him from their lives, Rita didn't question the methods. She accepted the outcome, seeing his removal as justice, even without knowing the full extent of what Dexter had done. Similarly, in season 4, when Dexter punched Elliot for kissing her, she barely reacted, showing that she wasn't fundamentally opposed to violent retaliation when it felt justified. Rita wasn't confrontational, but when it came to protecting her family, she never objected to force being used as a means of defense. If Dexter had ever revealed the full truth, she might have rationalized it, especially if he framed it as protecting the innocent. A key example is Nathan Martin, the predator Dexter killed after realizing that he was targeting Aster. If Rita had known Dexter's actions directly spared their daughter from lifelong trauma, would she have condemned him or felt relief? Given her history of forgiveness and prioritizing stability, she might not have turned against him immediately. Instead, she could have justified his actions and the Code of Harry overlooking the killing and staying with Dexter. It's not unreasonable to suggest this. She had overlooked Dexter's odd behavior before. If she ever found out the truth, it might not have been too difficult for her to turn a blind eye again. For instance, when Cody got into a fight at school with a kid who claimed Dexter had left the camping trip in the middle of the night, Rita didn't question it. In reality, Dexter had snugged Jonathan Farrow. She didn't question him. When Dexter was absent from Thanksgiving dinner, she didn't question him. She accepted his explanations without much resistance. A few isolated incidents might not have raised suspicion, but with Dexter, this was a reoccurring pattern, one that Rita consistently ignored. Whether consciously or not, Rita seemed to be in denial about Dexter's true nature. After enduring an abusive marriage with Paul and a troubled relationship history before him, she might have ignored any suspicions out of fear of making another mistake, breaking up her family again, and putting her kids through more turmoil. If she were ever to discover Dexter's secret, there's a strong possibility that her first instinct wouldn't be to turn him in or leave him, but to rationalize it, much like she has done in the past. She might convince herself that Dexter's killings served a purpose, that he was still a loving husband and father, and that keeping the family together was more important than confronting the dark truth of being a killer. Rita deeply loved Dexter and valued the stability he provided for her children, especially after enduring the abuse of her ex-husband, Paul Bennett. From the beginning, Dexter was a caring, playful figure in their lives, offering a stark contrast to the chaos that Paul had caused. Rita's capacity for forgiveness was evident when she overlooked Dexter's brutal takedown of Paul, choosing instead to focus on the safety and security he brought to their family. She also forgave him for severe betrayals, like when he cheated with Lila, primarily because she didn't want to take away a father figure from her children again. Throughout the relationship, she remained in denial about Dexter's odd behavior, never questioning his frequent disappearances or suspicious actions, likely because she didn't want to confront the possibility of having chosen another dangerous man. Additionally, Rita demonstrated an understanding of justified violence. She accepted Dexter's aggression towards Paul, barely reacted when he punched Elliot for kissing her, and would have likely sympathized with his actions against predators like Nathan Martin. While it's uncertain whether she would have fully accepted Dexter's secret, her love for him, her desire to protect her family's stability, and her history of rationalizing his behavior suggests that she might have, at the very least, tried to overlook it as a means of preserving the life they had built together. Rita genuinely cared about Dexter, and learning about his past only deepened that. Knowing that he had witnessed his mother's brutal murder, spent 2 days trapped in her blood as a child, and later struggled with his dark passenger, she might have felt even more compelled to help him rather than walk away. Especially in the later seasons, it's likely that she would have tried to support and heal him. She wasn't the type to abandon someone she loved, and with her compassionate nature, she might have believed that she could cure his need to kill.
I married you because I want to get to know the real you.
If she did accept him, I think there are 2 possible scenarios. In one, she might have chosen to turn a blind eye to his activities, pretending they didn't happen as a way to cope with the truth. In the other, she could have taken a more active role, trying to soothe, comfort, and heal him, much like Deborah would later attempt to do. I'm curious about what you guys think. Please do subscribe and comment down below as we dive into the other side of the argument, whether Rita would have rejected Dexter after discovering he was a serial killer. She made it clear in the couple's therapy the two started having that she wanted to do this, so she may take this approach. In my opinion, the case for Rita rejecting Dexter is even stronger, beyond the obvious reason that she thinks killing is wrong. Rita's entire world revolved around her children. Without them, it's hard to imagine she would see much purpose in her life, and because of that, their safety was always her top priority. This is made clear with Paul. She endured years of abuse, but the moment she truly broke free was when she realized the kind of trauma he could inflict on Aster and Cody. She refused to let them suffer through the same pain she had, making it her mission to shield them from anything that could harm them. So if she discovered that Dexter was a serial killer, her first instinct would likely be absolute terror, not just for herself, but for her kids. How could she see the man she loved the same way, knowing he's killed people, and then came home to hold her children with those same hands? The sheer horror of that realization would be enough to shake her to her core and leave Dexter. Previously, I argued that her past relationship with Paul might make her more inclined to stay with Dexter despite his darkness. His stability, kindness, and love could have outweighed the horrifying truth, but it is just as easy to argue the opposite, that her history with Paul would have made her even more likely to leave. Having experienced abuse and violence firsthand, Rita likely has zero tolerance for bad men.
I thought you were different than Paul, but you're the same. Actually, you're worse. You made me trust you.
After enduring Paul's abuse, she wouldn't risk putting herself or her children through that same kind of pain again. Knowing Dexter was a killer would shatter any sense of security she had built, making it impossible for her to justify staying, especially after believing he was a recovering drug addict. She had escaped one destructive relationship, and she wouldn't willingly step into another. I think one of the most instrumental pieces of evidence of this video is Rita's stance on the Bay Harbor butcher. When Cody became scared that the infamous killer might come after him, Rita didn't hesitate to voice her disapproval. She openly expressed negative opinions about the butcher, showing that she saw him as a threat rather than some kind of vigilante or necessary evil.
Makes me so angry that there's some monster out there scaring my son.
I gotta go to work.
You know, I hope they catch him today. And I'm not a violent person, but I hope they hurt him.
This reaction suggests that if she ever found out that Dexter was the butcher, her immediate response would be fear and rejection rather than acceptance. This reinforces the idea that even though Rita knew the Bay Harbor butcher only targeted bad people, she still fundamentally opposed what he stood for. Her disagreement was so strong that she even wanted him to suffer for his actions. If Rita ever discovered that Dexter was the Bay Harbor butcher, her first reaction would likely be fear, shock, and immediate rejection, followed by an overwhelming sense of betrayal, and that betrayal is key. Trust was one of the most important aspects of a relationship for Rita. She almost broke up with Dexter when she felt that she couldn't trust him, whether it was over his supposed drug addiction in season 1 or his secrecy about keeping his apartment after their marriage in season 4. Time and time again, when Dexter hid things from her, it shook the foundation of their relationship.
I need a partner, Dexter. Someone I can trust. Unless you can be completely honest with me. I don't want to do this anymore.
But if she found out that he was a serial killer, that would be the ultimate betrayal. It would prove that the man she married, the man she thought she knew, was nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. His entire identity, his kindness, his stability, his love, would suddenly seem like an illusion. And once that trust was broken, there would be no repairing it. And she would be completely justified in feeling that way. I mean, I know I definitely would. She would never be able to trust him again, and without that trust, a relationship would be impossible. Another crucial point is that Rita was willing to break up with Dexter over issues far less severe than being a serial killer. She temporarily ended things when she discovered that he had cheated on her with Lila in season 2, and she also threatened to leave when he hesitated about having a child with her. I can give multiple other examples, but I know some of you will start complaining about me repeating myself, so I'll hold off for now. If she was willing to consider breaking up with Dexter over these things, serious but nowhere near the gravity of murder, it's almost a certainty that discovering that he was a serial killer would have been an immediate deal breaker. Someone who views infidelity or a lack of commitment to fatherhood as relationship-ending betrayals is not someone who would look past cold-blooded killing. Also, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying the video. Finally, it's important to consider the state of their relationship by the end of season 4. By that point, they were already growing somewhat distant. One of the clearest examples was Rita kissing Elliot on Thanksgiving. She instantly regretted it, but the fact that it happened at all spoke volumes about the cracks forming in their marriage.
We have this connection, and it's not just because we're both lonely. It's
No, I'm not lonely. And I have Dexter.
the guy who's never home.
Elliot was absolutely right, and I think Rita knew this. If the relationship was already under strain, the revelation that Dexter was a serial killer would shatter things beyond repair. As a result of the kiss, the two went to couples therapy, where Rita strongly emphasized how much trust meant to their relationship. However, it became clear during those sessions that the relationship was already under strain, particularly from Rita's side. She was beginning to question whether Dexter was truly committed to her and the family, and she wasn't entirely sure if she could fully commit to him either. If Rita didn't feel completely secure in their relationship and wasn't fully convinced of Dexter's love for her, it's highly unlikely that she would have stayed with him after discovering he was a serial killer. Although Dexter and Rita had patched things up by the end of season 4, I'm almost certain that they would have faced the same issues again before long, if not for, well, what happened. Now that I've covered all my points, I want to explore the bigger question. If Rita rejected Dexter's secret life, what would she actually do? I think most likely she would quietly leave, taking the kids with her. One day, Dexter would come home to an empty house. Rita and the children gone, likely have moved out the state to escape him. I find it highly unlikely that Rita would have gone to the police, mainly because she would want to protect the kids' image of their father, as I've discussed before. The kids already had endured enough trauma, and discovering their stepfather was a serial killer would be absolutely devastating. Rita, always putting them first, would likely do everything in her power to shield them from the truth and keep them safe. Additionally, her past experiences with law enforcement weren't exactly positive. When she tried to report Paul for attacking her, he managed to manipulate the situation and nearly cost her custody of the kids. She knew firsthand how flawed the system could be, and likely wouldn't trust the police to handle the situation properly. Instead, to ensure her safety and the safety of her children, she would do what she did best: leave quietly and start over somewhere new. Now, whether Rita would have accepted Dexter or not largely depends on when she found out. In the early seasons, Rita was more timid, unsure of herself, and heavily reliant on Dexter. As a survivor of domestic abuse, she was vulnerable, and in some ways desperate for stability. At this stage, the relationship wasn't as deep, which makes the argument go both ways. On one hand, you could argue that she might have accepted Dexter because she was more easily influenced and needed security. On the other hand, she wasn't as emotionally attached to him yet, which could have made her more likely to walk away, prioritizing her children's safety over staying in another dangerous relationship. By the end of season 4, however, Rita had grown into a more confident, independent woman with a stronger sense of self. She had settled into her suburban life, built a solid support system, and was no longer the vulnerable person she once was. Next up, we have Captain Matthews knew Dexter was a serial killer, a theory that becomes a little harder to ignore. From a dying cop making one final call to his best friend, to a police captain watching his own department hand a serial killer the keys to the evidence locker, this isn't just a story about silence. Because Captain Matthews didn't miss all the signs, he might have known every single one. Starting with the suicide that covered up a monster. The foundation of Captain Matthews' knowledge about Dexter began with a devastating phone call that would haunt him for years to come. On the day before Harry Morgan's suicide, Harry called Matthews and made a cryptic request to watch over Dexter and his sister Deborah. This was the desperate plea of a dying man who carried an unbearable secret. Harry Morgan was one of the most respected officers in Miami Metro service, often considered a hero, and Thomas Matthews was his closest friend. Their partnership went beyond professional boundaries. They had worked together for years, shared the dangers of police work, and Matthews had witnessed Harry's dedication to justice firsthand. When Harry made that final phone call, Matthews knew that something was terribly wrong, but he couldn't have imagined the full scope of what Harry was hiding. The truth was that Harry had discovered Dexter dismembering his victim, Juan Rhinus, just 3 days earlier, and the horror of seeing his work firsthand. The proud way Dexter displayed the dismembered body had shattered Harry completely. Harry realized that his training had created a monster, and the guilt became unbearable. But in that final conversation with Matthews, Harry's request to watch over his children carried deeper implications than Matthew initially understood. Harry committed suicide by overdosing on his heart medication, and Matthews made the crucial decision to hide the autopsy report and cover up the true cause of death. He told Dexter and Deborah and told them that Harry had died of heart disease, believing that he was protecting them from additional trauma. But this cover-up decision reveals something significant. Matthew was willing to falsify official police records based solely on Harry's final request. For Matthew to take such an enormous professional and legal risk suggests that he suspected that there was more to Harry's request than simple paternal concern. A seasoned police captain doesn't falsify death records without understanding the gravity of what he's covering up. The most telling aspect of this incident is that Harry specifically asked Matthews to watch over Dexter, not just Deborah. I think Matthews realized even then that Harry's suicide was about something far more personal and dangerous involving Dexter specifically. But Matthews inherited a problem that would soon start showing its true nature. As captain of Miami Metro Homicide, Matthews had oversight of all department operations, including access to case files, evidence storage, and computer databases. What he witnessed over the years was a pattern of behavior from Dexter Morgan that should have been suspicious for any vigilant police administrator. Dexter worked as a blood spatter analyst in forensics department, but his activities went far beyond what his job required. Throughout his tenure at Miami Metro, Dexter consistently showed unusual interest in old cases, cold files, and suspects who had escaped justice through legal technicalities. While other forensic technicians focused on current active investigations, Dexter routinely accessed files on closed cases involving killers who had been released or acquitted. The forensics department utilized police databases that provided extensive information, including names, pictures, addresses, and criminal histories. Dexter's position gave him legitimate access to these systems, but his usage patterns were far from typical. He regularly researched individuals who weren't connected to any active cases he was assigned to, often spending significant time reviewing files on murders that had have been officially closed. What made this particularly suspicious was the timing and frequency of Dexter's research activities. He often accessed these files during off hours or between cases, suggesting personal rather than professional interest. The subjects of his research consistently involved murderers who had evaded conviction, creating a clear pattern that any observant supervisor would notice. But what really should have caught Matthew's attention was Dexter's uncanny psychological insights during investigations. Throughout Dexter's career at Miami Metro, Matthews witnessed something that should have raised serious questions. A forensic analyst who consistently demonstrated remarkable insight into killers' psychology and methods. While other technicians focused on the scientific analysis of evidence, Dexter regularly provided investigative breakthroughs that went far beyond his job description. Matthew observed Dexter during multiple major cases, watching as he provided detailed theories about how the killers thought, what drove them to kill, and how they selected their victims. This level of psychological insight was unusual for a forensic technician, whose training typically focused on physical evidence rather than criminal psychology. What made these insights particularly suspicious was their accuracy. Dexter's theories about killer behavior were consistently proven correct, allowing detectives to anticipate suspects' actions and ultimately solve cases. His understanding of criminal methodology was so precise that it often seemed like he was speaking from personal experience rather than academic knowledge. I believe that Matthew noticed these patterns early in Dexter's career, but chose to interpret them as enthusiasm for justice rather than something more sinister. If you're already connecting the dots, go ahead and subscribe, because the further this goes, the harder it gets to pretend that Matthews didn't see what was right in front of him. The convenience of Dexter's insights would prove costly, because this wasn't academic curiosity. It was inside knowledge from someone living the psychology he was analyzing. The most damning evidence of Captain Matthews' complicity came during the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, when he found himself in an extraordinary position of watching Dexter literally investigate himself. This created a parallel investigation scenario that should have been impossible to miss for any competent police administrator. Yet Matthews not only allowed it to continue, but actively facilitated it. When 30+ dismembered bodies were discovered in Miami's harbor, Matthews helped establish the FBI task force led by Special Agent Frank Lundy to hunt the killer dubbed the Bay Harbor Butcher. What happened next should have triggered immediate suspicion from any observant supervisor. Matthew witnessed Dexter being assigned as the primary forensic analyst for the biggest serial killer investigation in Miami Metro's history. This meant that Dexter was responsible for analyzing evidence, processing crime scenes, and providing expert testimony about a killer whose methods he knew intimately, because he was that killer. The investigation reached a critical turning point when James Doakes stole Dexter's blood slide collection, and the FBI discovered the slides in Doakes' car. At this moment, Matthew made a decision that would prove crucial. He enforced an in-house forensic investigation and made Dexter the lead technician in analyzing the slides. Matthews personally presented Dexter with the blood slide box alongside Lundy, watching as Dexter calmly examined evidence of his own crimes. The slides contained blood samples from 46 victims, 18 of which matched the recovered bodies. Dexter was ordered to match the blood slides to the victims, essentially asking him to catalog his own murders for the FBI. What made this even more suspicious was Matthews' demeanor during this process. He showed no signs of finding it strange that their most cautious and precise forensic specialist was being asked to analyze evidence that would definitely prove the guilt of a colleague. Matthew treated the situation as a routine police work rather than the extraordinary conflict of interest it represented. Whether Matthews' decision was intentionally protective or simply negligent remains unclear, but either explanation suggests concerning judgment. What's certain is that Matthews made a decision that gave the real Bay Harbor Butcher complete control over the forensic analysis of his own crimes. The pattern of convenient deaths would continue to mount, but Matthews would face his biggest test when someone finally started connecting the dots years later. Matthews knew about the Morgan family trauma long before it became relevant to any case. Dexter's unusually personal investment in catching a serial killer who seemed to be specifically targeting him. The ice truck killer case revealed disturbing parallels that Matthew couldn't have missed. Both Dexter and the killer had intimate knowledge of crime scene methodology. Both showed sophisticated understanding of police procedures, and both seemed to be playing an elaborate psychological game with each other rather than the typical cat and mouse dynamic between law enforcement and criminals. When Brian Moser was revealed as the ice truck killer, Matthews learned that Dexter's biological brother had become a serial killer after experiencing the same childhood trauma. This revelation should have triggered immediate psychological evaluation and supervision for Dexter. Instead, Matthews allowed him to continue working cases without any additional oversight or counseling requirements. The statistical improbability of two brothers from the same traumatic background ending up on opposite sides of a serial killer investigation, one as the killer and one as the forensic expert hunting him, should have been suspicious to any competent administrator. Matthews knew about Dexter's childhood trauma. knew about Brian's crimes, and yet never questioned whether Dexter might have been similarly affected by their shared experiences. Most telling was Dexter's presence during both major confrontations with Brian. Matthews witnessed how Dexter happened to be in the right place at the right time to stop his brother, despite having no official reason to be conducting field investigation work as a forensic analyst. I think Matthews recognized that the ice truck killer connection was too personal and too convenient to be coincidental, but chose to see Dexter as the hero who stopped his killer brother rather than questioning what other similarities that they might share. This family connection would prove to be just the beginning of a pattern of personal investments that no forensic analyst should have had. Captain Matthews had worked alongside Sergeant James Dokes for years and knew his background, methods, and psychological profile better than almost anyone. When the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation pointed towards Dokes as the prime suspect, Matthews should have immediately recognized that the killer methodology was completely inconsistent with everything he knew about the decorated war veteran. James Dokes was a former Army Ranger who had served with the elite 75th Rangers Regiment Regimental Reconnaissance Detachment. His military training had instilled in him specific combat methodologies, tactical precision, and operational discipline that would be nearly impossible to abandon in civilian life. Dokes had earned the nickname Sane James during his military service for the ability to detect the mentally unhinged, demonstrating exceptional psychological insight and tactical awareness. The Bay Harbor Butcher's kills were characterized by methodical dismemberment, careful body disposal in specific ocean currents, and the collection of blood slides as trophies. This ritualistic approach suggested someone with deep psychological compulsions and a need for personal connection to each victim. Dokes, with his military background, would have favored quick, efficient eliminations without the time-consuming ritual elements. Moreover, the Bay Harbor Butcher's pattern of target selection was based on personal moral judgments about their crimes and their escape from justice. Dokes, while having a strong sense of justice, operated within established military and police protocols, not personal vigilante philosophies. Additionally, the forensic evidence suggested someone with extensive knowledge of blood spatter analysis and crime scene investigation, technical forensic knowledge that Dokes, despite being an expert detective, simply didn't possess. Matthews knew that Dokes had killed specific targets during his military black operations, but these were mission-based eliminations of confirmed enemy combatants, not the psychological gratification killings that characterized the Butcher. The difference between a soldier following orders and a serial killer feeding psychological compulsions should have been obvious to any experienced law enforcement administrator. I think that Matthews recognized these inconsistencies, but felt pressured by the mounting evidence that had been planted against Dokes. Dokes didn't match the profile, but Dexter did, and Matthews had the training to spot it. Drop a comment. Do you think that Matthews really believed that Dokes was guilty, or was he just protecting the wrong guy? Matthews' failure to voice these concerns publicly represented either willful blindness or a conscious decision to allow an innocent man to take the blame for crimes that clearly didn't match his profile. Captain Matthews' knowledge of Dexter's true nature became undeniable during the Trinity Killer investigation, when a series of coincidences should have made it impossible to ignore that Dexter was far more involved than any forensic analyst should have been. What Matthews witnessed during this investigation was extraordinary. Dexter somehow managed to get closer to the Trinity Killer than the entire FBI task force, the Miami Metro detectives, or even the legendary Frank Lundy, who had been hunting Trinity for 15 years. The most suspicious aspect was how intimately familiar Dexter became with Trinity's methods and psychology, demonstrating detailed knowledge that suggests someone who had studied Trinity far more closely than his job required. But what should have been the worst was Rita's murder. When Trinity killed Rita Morgan, it didn't fit his normal modus operandi, and the timing was too convenient. Trinity somehow discovered Dexter's identity and home address just as Dexter was closing in on him. This suggested a much more personal connection between the two killers than would be expected from a routine forensic investigation. Over his years as captain and later deputy chief, Matthews would have also witnessed a disturbing pattern that should have been seriously concerning about Dexter's involvement in cases. Throughout seasons 1 through 6, a suspicious number of suspects in Dexter's investigations died before they could stand trial or reveal information that might implicate him. Matthews was present during the ice truck killer case when Neil Perry was arrested as a false suspect and then later witnessed the dramatic conclusion with Brian Moser's death. He oversaw the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation where the prime suspect, James Dokes, died in an explosion at a remote cabin. During the Trinity Killer case, Arthur Mitchell was found dead after an apparent confrontation. The pattern became even more apparent in subsequent cases. Suspects would be identified, pursued by Miami Metro with Dexter's forensic expertise guiding the investigation, and then mysteriously turn up dead before they could be properly interrogated or tried. As a career law enforcement officer, Matthews understood that while dangerous suspects sometimes died during apprehension, the frequency of these deaths in cases where Dexter provided forensic analysis was statistically improbable. I think Matthews Matthews was too career-focused to dig too deeply into something that was making his department look efficient, but the pattern was undeniable for anyone actually paying attention. The blood slide discovery would force Matthews to confront the possibility that all these convenient deaths weren't coincidental at all. Matthews' reluctance to investigate Dexter wasn't just about loyalty to Harry Morgan, it was about protecting his own career advancement. Throughout his tenure as captain and later deputy chief, Matthews built his professional reputation on the success of high-profile case closures that consistently involved Dexter's crucial contributions. The Bay Harbor Butcher case closure became the cornerstone of Matthews' campaign for deputy chief. Having the forensic expert who caught the most notorious serial killer in Miami's history working in his department was an enormous professional asset. Matthew used this success to promote himself within the department hierarchy, making Dexter's continued reputation essential to his own career prospects. What made this particularly problematic was how Matthews allowed Dexter unprecedented freedom to work cases outside his jurisdiction and job description. While other forensic staff were limited to laboratory analysis, Dexter was giving access to crime scenes, evidence storage, and investigative resources typically reserved for detectives. Matthews signed off on overtime requests for Dexter's research activities and approved his attendance at court hearings and crime scene investigations that had nothing to do with blood spatter analysis. Matthews also witnessed the Miguel Prado situation, where the respected assistant district attorney was found murdered after developing a close working relationship with Dexter. The timing was suspicious. Prado had been investigating cases that overlapped with Dexter's forensic work, and his death eliminated someone who had gained unusual insight into Dexter's methods and psychology. The Jordan Chase case represented another example of Matthews benefiting from Dexter's breakthroughs while ignoring obvious red flags. When a complex network of killers was systematically eliminated before they could reveal the full scope of their crimes, Matthews celebrated the case closure without questioning how one forensic analyst had managed to uncover connections that escaped an entire task force. Each successful case closure enhanced Matthews' reputation and advanced prospects, creating a financial incentive to avoid scrutinizing the methods that produce such impressive results. His department clearance rates were among the highest in the state, largely due to cases where Dexter provided crucial insights that led to quick resolutions. I believe that Matthews understood that investigating Dexter too closely would jeopardize not just individual cases, but his entire career trajectory, which had been built on the foundation of Dexter's contributions to high-profile investigations. The professional benefits of having Dexter in his department far outweighed any moral concerns on how those results were achieved, because if you look deeper into it, there were several witness protection failures and missing persons. Matthews' knowledge of Dexter's activities extended beyond solved cases to encompass a disturbing pattern of witness disappearances and informant deaths that consistently benefited ongoing investigations. As deputy chief, Matthews had oversight of witness protection protocols and confidential informant management, giving him access to information that revealed how often potential witnesses vanished just before they could provide testimony that might complicate case closures. Throughout Dexter's tenure at Miami Metro, several key witnesses in major investigations died under suspicious circumstances before they could testify. These weren't random street crimes or obvious retaliation killings. They were careful eliminations that removed specific individuals who possessed information that could have exposed the true scope of various criminal enterprises. The Little Chino case exemplified this pattern. Jorge Orozco, known as Lil Chino, was a drug dealer who had information about police corruption and protection rackets within Miami Metro. After Dexter processed the crime scene where Little Chino's girlfriend was murdered, Chino himself disappeared without a trace. His body was never found, but Matthews signed off on presuming him dead, allowing the corruption investigation to die with him. Matthews oversaw the Jeremy Downs case, where a suspected child killer was found dead in a cell before he could reveal information about a larger pedophile network. Dexter had been the primary forensics analyst on Downs' original case, and had unusual access to evidence that suggested connections to other suspects who were never investigated after Downs' convenient death. The most telling pattern involved confidential informants who had provided information about killers that Dexter later investigated. These informants would agree to cooperate with police, provide initial statements that help identify suspects, and then disappear before they could provide follow-up testimony or testify at trial. Matthews processed several missing person reports for informants who had worked with cases involving Dexter's forensic analysis. Matthews also had access to federal databases that tracked witness protection program participants. Several individuals who had requested protection after providing information about violent criminals later left the program voluntarily, claiming they no longer feel threatened. These departures consistently occurred after Dexter had gained access to their case files through his forensic work. The domestic violence shelter database showed another suspicious pattern. Women who had escaped abusive relationships and provide testimony against their attackers would sometimes return to their abusers voluntarily, often just before major court proceedings. In several cases, these women later died in what appeared to be domestic violence incidents, but Dexter had been involved in processing evidence from their original assault cases. What made these patterns particularly damning was the consistency across different types of cases and different time periods. Matthews witnessed the same sequence repeatedly. Witnesses would cooperate initially, and Dexter would gain access to their information through legitimate forensic work. And then the witness would either disappear or die before they could provide testimony that might complicate case closures. I believe that Matthews recognized that these disappearances were too convenient and too consistent to be coincidental, but chose to interpret them as signs of effective law enforcement rather than evidence of systematic witness elimination. The alternative, acknowledging that someone within his department was systematically eliminating potential witnesses, would have required an investigation that could have also destroyed the reputation that he had spent decades building. And if that wasn't bad enough, there was also the bloodslide discovery and boat interrogation. The moment that should have confirmed Matthew's suspicions came in season 7 when Captain Maria LaGuerta discovered a bloodslide at Travis Marshall's crime scene. This discovery represented the smoking gun that connected Dexter to the Bay Harbor butcher case, and Matthew's reaction revealed everything about what he truly knew. After confirming from a private lab that the blood on the slide belonged to Travis Marshall, LaGuerta came to believe that James Dokes was innocent and that the real Bay Harbor butcher may still have been active. She brought this evidence to Matthews, knowing that during the Bay Harbor butcher case, only the serial killer took bloodslide as trophies. Matthews' initial response was to dismiss LaGuerta's theory entirely, mockingly accusing her of drinking and stating Dokes was the Bay Harbor butcher. End of story. But his resistance wasn't the reaction of someone hearing this theory for the first time. It was the response of someone trying to shut down an investigation that threatened to expose something he already knew. When Matthews eventually agreed to help LaGuerta investigate, but only after she promised to get his job back, he invited Dexter to his boat for what would become the most revealing conversation in the series. This wasn't a genuine interrogation. It was a warning disguised as questioning. Matthews systematically laid out everything LaGuerta knew. She knows your life story, your childhood, what you saw in that cargo container. Most people that screw them up for life. I mean, your brother went through the same thing you did and look what happened to him. This wasn't how innocent supervisors question employees. This was how accomplices share intelligence. Matthews was essentially briefing Dexter on the scope of the investigation against him, giving him every piece of information he needed to craft an effective defense. When Dexter realized he was being interrogated, he quickly made up a story about a non-existent boat owned by Dokes that he docked at the Coral Cove Marina. Matthews immediately accepted this explanation despite its obvious flaws. An experienced investigator would have pressed for details, asked for documentation, or at least expressed skepticism about such a convenient revelation. Instead, Matthews went straight to LaGuerta with Dexter's story and defended it when she expressed doubt. When they actually found the boat's storage facility with planted evidence, trash bags, plastic wraps, knives, and Dokes' fingerprint, Matthews' behavior during the discovery was crucial. When LaGuerta pointed out that Dexter is a forensic expert who has the skill to plant such evidence, Matthews told her to let it go, rather than pursuing this obvious possibility. I think this boat conversations was Matthews' way of managing the situation while maintaining plausible deniability. He could claim he was investigating while actually facilitating Dexter's cover-up. Now, if that boat conversation felt less like an interrogation and more like a strategy meeting, you're not alone. Hit the like if Matthews crossed the line from supervisor to silent accomplice. At this point, Matthews was drawing the map for Dexter to escape justice, and that's very apparent when you look at LaGuerta's murder and Matthews' final choice. The ultimate proof of Matthews' complicity came in his reaction to LaGuerta's death and his role in covering up what was obviously Dexter's final solution to the investigation problem. When faced with the choice between justice and protecting the Morgan family, Matthews chose family loyalty over his oath as a law enforcement officer. LaGuerta's investigation had reached a critical point where she possessed GPS tracking warrants that would have proven both Dexter and Deborah's involvement in the Travis Marshall murder and church fire. She had refused to accept the planted evidence at the boat storage facility and continued building her case against Dexter as the Bay Harbor butcher. LaGuerta's death, staged to look like a mutual shooting with Hector Estrada, should have been immediately suspicious for any competent investigator. The timing was too convenient, coming just as her investigation was about to expose Dexter. The circumstances were too neat, with both the investigator and her prime suspect's revenge target dying simultaneously in what appeared to be a planned confrontation. Matthews' response to this coincidence revealed everything about his true loyalties. At LaGuerta's memorial service, Matthews presented a bench made in honor of Maria LaGuerta and her service to Miami, playing the role of a grieving colleague while knowing the truth about her death. More importantly, after LaGuerta's death, Angel Batista went through her belongings and found the warrants that she had kept during her investigation of Dexter and Deborah. He ripped up the warrants that could have otherwise implicated the two in the murder of Travis Marshall. This destruction of evidence happened under Matthew's watch as deputy chief, and his failure to preserve or investigate these materials was a clear obstruction of justice. Matthew had spent an entire season helping LaGuerta investigate Dexter, supposedly to clear Dokes' name and restore his own pension. But when LaGuerta died just as she was about to expose the truth, Matthews made no effort to continue her work or honor her sacrifice. Instead, he allowed crucial evidence to be destroyed and the investigation to die with her. The fact that Matthews continued working with Dexter and Deborah after LaGuerta's suspicious death, while knowing about her investigation and the evidence she gathered, proves that he was an active participant in the cover-up rather than an unknowing supervisor. I believe that this final act sealed Matthews' transformation from a compromised supervisor into a full accomplice, choosing family loyalty over justice in the most definitive way possible. Captain Matthews didn't need a confession to know what Dexter was. He had the motive, the patterns, and the chance to stop it all. But every time he looked the other way, whether it was out of loyalty, fear, or guilt, it doesn't matter. What matters is he helped the Bay Harbor Butcher stay hidden right in the heart of Miami Metro. And now, Camilla Fig knew Dexter was a serial killer, where the signs start to feel far more intentional. From the bridge table where she watched Dexter grow up, to the hospital bed where she asked him to kill her, Camilla Fig was Dexter's first accomplice. This is how she figured it out, how long she kept the secret, and how far she went to protect a serial killer she considered family. Camilla Fig was practically family to the Morgans, with decades of intimate access to Harry's parenting decisions and Dexter's increasingly unusual development. Jean and Camilla Fig were Harry and Doris Morgan's closest companions for over 2 decades, spending countless evenings playing bridge at the kitchen table, sharing holiday dinners, and navigating the complexities of raising children in law enforcement families. These were people who knew each other's deepest secrets, financial struggles, and family dramas. When Harry first brought home the traumatized 3-year-old who would become Dexter, Camilla was there. She witnessed the sleepless nights, the specialized therapy sessions, and Harry's growing concern about his adopted son's complete lack of emotional response to normal childhood experiences. While other adults might have attributed Dexter's behavior to his horrific early trauma, Camilla observed something more troubling. As Dexter grew older, Camilla had a front row seat to witness his disturbing development under Harry's increasingly secretive guidance. She watched as normal childhood milestones passed without the expected emotional growth. Birthday parties where Dexter mimicked happiness rather than feeling it. Christmas mornings where he perfectly performed gratitude while remaining completely detached. She noticed the intense, whispered conversations between Harry and Dexter that stopped abruptly when adults entered the room. Most telling were Harry's reactions to his son's behavior. Instead of seeking professional help for what appeared to be severe emotional dysfunction, Harry began implementing what he called structure and discipline. Camilla witnessed late-night phone calls where Harry sounded more like he was managing a crisis than raising a child. The bridge games became tense affairs where Harry and Doris would exchange worried glances whenever Dexter's name came up in conversation. Camilla began to understand that Harry was actively managing something dangerous in his son, something he couldn't discuss even with his closest friends. Unlike other family friends who dismissed Dexter's oddities as the lingering effects of childhood trauma, Camilla's intimate knowledge of family dynamics allowed her to recognize the truth. Harry was carefully shaping and controlling something potentially lethal. This early recognition created an unspoken understanding between Camilla and Harry. She became complicit in maintaining the family's carefully constructed facade, never questioning Harry's unconventional methods or expressing concern about Dexter's development to outside parties. When other friends asked about the boy's progress, Camilla deflected with vague reassurances. But knowing who he was as a boy wasn't the only reason she stayed quiet. Her position at Miami Metro gave her full visibility into what he became. As Miami Metro's records supervisor, Camilla Fig held one of the most quietly powerful positions in the entire police department. She had unrestricted access to every criminal record, suspect file, sealed case note, and piece of evidence that passed through the system, including information that could expose patterns most detectives never noticed. When Dexter began working as a blood spatter analyst, his professional curiosity about certain cases seemed perfectly normal at first. Forensic specialists often research past cases for patterns, methodology, and comparative analysis, but Camilla began noticing something troubling about Dexter's specific request. He was systematically researching criminals who had escaped justice. The request started innocuously enough. Dexter would ask for files on suspects who had been released on technicalities, cases where evidence had been compromised, or situations where guilty men walked free due to procedural errors. Initially, Camilla assumed this was professional thoroughness or academic interest. After all, studying failed prosecutions could help improve future investigations. But the pattern became impossible to ignore when she realized Dexter's research focused exclusively on the most heinous offenders: child killers, serial rapists, and brutal murderers who had slipped through the legal cracks. He never requested files on white-collar criminals, drug dealers, or even armed robbers. His interest was laser-focused on the worst humanity had to offer, specifically those who continued walking free. Camilla's position gave her access to information that even detectives didn't always see. She could track which files were accessed, when, and by whom. She began noticing a disturbing timeline. Dexter would request a file, study it thoroughly, and then weeks or months later, that same criminal would mysteriously disappear or turn up dead under suspicious circumstances. The connection became undeniable when she cross-referenced Dexter's files requests with Miami's missing persons reports and unsolved murders. The correlation was too precise to be coincidental. Men like Jamie Jaworski, whose case file Dexter had studied extensively, simply vanished without explanation shortly after those requests. What made Camilla's situation particularly chilling was her willingness to continue providing these files despite recognizing the pattern. She had enough administrative authority to deny requests or flag suspicious research pattern to internal affairs. Instead, she became an active enabler, ensuring that Dexter had everything he needed to continue his work. Her complicity was deliberate assistance. When Dexter needed background information on potential targets, Camilla provided comprehensive files. When he required access to sealed records that technically required higher authorization, she found ways to bend the rules. She became his unofficial research assistant in activities she knew were leading to deaths. The most damning evidence of her awareness came during her conversations with other staff members, when colleagues occasionally commented on Dexter's unusual research interests. Camilla would deflect it with humor, calling it his morbid sense of fun. It was active misdirection designed to protect him from scrutiny. Years of providing files that led directly to disappearances should have triggered some kind of internal investigation or a personal crisis of conscience. Instead, Camilla continued her assistance, proving that her loyalty to the Morgan family suspended her professional obligations and moral boundaries. If you're already connecting the dots here, hit that like button. Camilla didn't just suspect Dexter, she helped him build the kill list. When she realized the full truth, she didn't alert anyone. Instead, she erased the one file that could have exposed everything. The moment Camilla Fay crossed the line from passive enabler to active conspirator came when she made the deliberate decision to destroy the most crucial piece of evidence that could have exposed Dexter's true nature: the 1973 Shipyard Massacre file that contained the horrific details of his mother's murder and his traumatic origins. In Season 1, when Dexter approached Camilla requesting the file on the Shipyard Massacre, her immediate and absolute refusal should have been the end of the conversation. Record supervisors routinely denied access to sensitive files, especially those involving ongoing investigations or sealed cases. But Camilla's reaction went far beyond standard bureaucratic procedure. She became visibly agitated and defensive, clearly hiding something significant. The 1973 Shipyard Massacre file contained crime scene photos of unprecedented brutality, witness statements describing the chainsaw dismemberment of multiple victims, and more importantly, documentation of a traumatized 3-year-old boy found sitting in a pool of his mother's blood. Any investigator studying this case would immediately recognize the psychological implications of such severe childhood trauma. What made Camilla's actions truly damning was her later confession to Dexter about what she'd done with the file. She had systematically destroyed every piece of evidence the day Harry officially adopted him. The timing of the destruction was crucial. Camilla waited until the adoption was finalized, ensuring that Dexter's legal connection to the Morgan family was secure before eliminating any trace of his biological origins. This level of premeditation proved that she understood exactly what she was protecting him from and why that protection was necessary. Her justification that Harry wanted to keep you safe revealed the conspiracy between them. She was following Harry's explicit instructions to eliminate evidence that could potentially expose the psychological damage that shaped Dexter's homicidal nature. Both of them understood that anyone investigating the Shipyard Massacre would immediately connect Dexter's trauma to his current behavioral patterns. The destruction of this file represented a point of no return for Camilla. She had moved from simply providing information to actively destroying evidence that could incriminate someone she knew was dangerous. She knowingly covered up evidence that could have explained a killer's origins. Most importantly, Camilla's willingness to destroy official police records demonstrated that she valued her loyalty to the Morgan family above her professional integrity and legal obligations. She understood that preserving this evidence could eventually lead to uncomfortable questions about Dexter's psychological development and Harry's unconventional parenting methods. The file destruction also revealed how long Camilla had been planning to protect Dexter. She didn't make this decision impulsively when he requested the file. She had it destroyed years earlier, proving that she anticipated this moment and taken preemptive action. This level of foresight suggested that she always known that Dexter would eventually want to understand his origins, and had deliberately eliminated that possibility. Her actions made sure that anyone investigating his background would hit a dead end, unable to trace the psychological roots of his behavior back to the traumatic event that shaped his entire identity. Even when a decorated cop like Doak started digging, Camilla protected Dexter at the cost of her integrity. The true test of Camilla's loyalty came when Sergeant James Dokes began his relentless investigation into Dexter's background, and her response revealed just how far she was willing to go to protect a man she knew was dangerous. When Dokes came looking for that same Shipyard Massacre file, Camilla's reaction proved that she would choose Dexter's safety over the truth, even when confronted by a decorated police sergeant. Dokes was conducting a serious investigation based on legitimate suspicions about his colleagues' behavior. As someone with military combat experience and finely tuned instincts for detecting threats, Dokes had recognized something fundamentally wrong about Dexter that others missed. His request for the Shipyard Massacre file represented a genuine attempt to understand the psychological roots of what he perceived as dangerous behavior. When Camilla told Dokes that the file didn't exist, she was lying directly to a police officer conducting an official investigation. This was a deliberate obstruction of justice. She knew exactly why Dokes wanted that information and chose to deny him access to evidence that could have validated his suspicions about Dexter. Dokes' frustration at hitting this dead end was completely justified, and his anger towards Camilla reflected his understanding that she was deliberately impeding his investigation. When he snapped at her for claiming the file was missing, he was reacting to obvious deception from someone who should have been cooperating with law enforcement. The most damning aspect of Camilla's response was her immediate decision to warn Dexter about Dokes' investigation. Instead of maintaining professional neutrality or reporting Dokes' suspicious behavior to superiors, she ran directly to Dexter with concerns about losing her job. Her claim was that she was worried about her employment was a transparent excuse for warning Dexter that someone was investigating his background. Camilla understood that Dokes represented the greatest threat Dexter had faced to that point, and her loyalty lay entirely with protecting the killer rather than helping the detective. This warning gave Dexter crucial time to prepare for Dokes' continued investigation and potentially eliminate the threat entirely. By alerting him to danger, Camilla became an active participant in whatever measures Dexter might take to protect himself. She understood that her information could lead to Dokes' death, and she provided it anyway. The incident also revealed how completely Camilla had chosen sides in this conflict. When faced with a choice between supporting a legitimate police investigation and protecting someone she knew was killing people, she chose protection without hesitation. Most tellingly, Camilla never expressed any guilt or second thoughts about obstructing Dokes' investigation. She never questioned whether she was doing the right thing or considered the possibility that Dokes might be trying to stop something terrible. Her loyalty to Dexter was absolute and unwavering, regardless of the consequences for others. Her actions during the Dokes investigation proved that she had moved far beyond passive complicity. She was now actively working to protect Dexter's ability to continue killing, even when it meant lying to police officers and obstructing legitimate investigations. This level of commitment to protecting a serial killer demonstrated just how completely she understood and accepted what he was. At that point, she was actively involved. By this point in their relationship, Camilla had moved beyond protecting Dexter from investigation to actively supporting him with the tools he needed to select and hunt his victims. Her provision of case files was direct participation in murder, and she knew it. The most obvious example was her handling of the James Jaworski file, a case that perfectly illustrated how Camilla's assistance translated directly into death. Jaworski was exactly the type of criminal who slipped through legal cracks, a suspected child killer who had escaped conviction due to insufficient evidence and prosecutorial incompetence. His case represented everything wrong with the justice system that Harry had taught Dexter to correct. When Dexter requested Jaworski's file, Camilla gave him comprehensive background data, personal details, current address information, and behavioral patterns that would be essential for someone planning to track and kill him. The timing between Dexter's file requests and subsequent disappearances had become impossible to ignore. Camilla would provide detailed information about a suspect's background, habits, and location within weeks or months, and that same person would vanish without explanation. The correlation was too precise to be coincidental, yet she continued providing files with full knowledge of their ultimate purpose. What made her actions particularly damning in this case was the specificity of the information she provided. Standard case files contain basic facts about crimes and investigations, but Camilla consistently went beyond official records to include personal details that would only be useful for someone planning direct contact with the subjects. Current addresses, employee information, family connections, and daily routines, all information that a killer would need but a legitimate researcher wouldn't. Her casual demeanor when discussing these files with Dexter revealed how completely she had normalized their arrangement. There was no tension, no moral conflict, no indication that she understood she was participating in murder. She treated these deadly transactions like routine administrative tasks, further proving her complete acceptance of Dexter's true nature. The craziest aspect of this pattern was Camilla's ability to look at case files and essentially select victims for Dexter. When she came across cases involving escaped killers, failed prosecutions, or obvious miscarriages of justice, she would bring them to his attention, knowing exactly what would happen next. She had not just become an enabler, but an active participant in the victim selection process. Her willingness to continue this pattern for years demonstrated that she felt no guilt or remorse about the deaths that resulted from her assistance. Each missing person, each unsolved disappearance, each case that went cold after Dexter's research, none of it troubled her conscience enough to stop providing information. This level of direct participation required Camilla to completely dehumanize Dexter's victims. She had to view these men as not human beings with rights and families, but as problems that needed to be solved through extrajudicial execution. Her moral framework had shifted so completely that she saw murder as justice and Dexter as his righteous agent. The systematic nature of her assistance proved that this was calculated. Ongoing participation in serial murder, with Camilla serving as Dexter's research department and target acquisition specialist. But even more damning evidence of her complete knowledge was yet to come, because she would soon reveal that she had always known the full truth about Dexter's origins and his brother's identity. I think by this point, Camilla had become so invested in Dexter's mission that she genuinely believed that she was helping serve justice, even though she was actually enabling a murderer. And when retirement came calling, she didn't worry about her pension. She worried about leaving Dexter unprotected. If you think this makes her an accessory, you're not wrong. Subscribe now because we're not even at the worst part yet. The depth of Camilla's commitment to protecting Dexter became most apparent when she began approaching retirement age and faced the terrifying prospect of leaving him vulnerable within the Miami metro system. Her strategic planning around her departure revealed that she viewed protecting him as her primary professional responsibility, more important than any official duties. By the time Camilla reached her 60s, she had already served Miami Metro for over 3 decades and was eligible for full retirement benefits. For most career employees, retirement planning involved financial considerations, pension calculations, and dreams of leisure time. But Camilla's retirement planning centered around a single overwhelming concern. How could she leave Dexter exposed to potential discovery by a replacement who might notice the pattern she had spent years concealing? The normal timeline for her retirement should have been straightforward. She had accumulated enough service years, her pension was secure, and her age made continued work optional rather than necessary. Yet Camilla delayed her departure year after year, citing various excuses about training replacements, completing ongoing projects, and ensuring smooth transitions. The real reason was her fear of abandoning the person who had become her primary concern. Her decision to postpone retirement was strategic protection of a serial killer who depended on her institutional knowledge and administrative access to continue operating safely. She understood that a new records supervisor might notice things that she had spent decades carefully managing and concealing. The challenge of training a replacement without exposing Dexter's activities required incredible delicacy. Camilla needed to teach someone the technical aspects of record management while ensuring they never developed the analytical skills or institutional memory that might reveal dangerous patterns. She had to share operational knowledge while withholding the intuitive understanding that came from decades of protecting someone specific. Her comments about having so much work to do were about the ongoing project of maintaining Dexter's cover, ensuring his continued access to information and protecting him from the kind of scrutiny that a fresh perspective might bring to the records department. Most telling was her resistance to training anyone too thoroughly in the deeper aspects of file management and historical case access. She deliberately kept certain knowledge to herself, understanding that comprehensive training might create someone capable of recognizing the patterns that she had worked so hard to obscure. Her replacement would inherit the job, but not the full understanding necessary to continue her protective work. The retirement planning also revealed how completely her professional identity had merged with her role as Dexter's protector. She couldn't separate her legitimate job responsibilities from her unofficial duties as his enabler and guardian. Leaving work meant abandoning him, and that was a betrayal that she couldn't contemplate. Her eventual decision to finally retire came only when her cancer diagnosis made continued work impossible. And even then, she spent her final working days ensuring that any potential problematic files were properly archived, and that access protocols were simplified in ways that would benefit Dexter while confusing potential investigators. The timing of her retirement and subsequent death ensured that she would never have to face the consequences of leaving Dexter unprotected. She managed to maintain her guardianship role right up until her death, never experiencing the anxiety of wondering whether her replacement might discover what she had spent decades concealing. The most shocking revelation about Camilla's knowledge came when she confessed that she had read Dexter's entire adoption file before destroying it, meaning she knew everything about his traumatic past, his connection to Brian Moser, and the psychological damage that shaped him into a killer. This was informed complicitly with full understanding of the consequences. When Camilla admitted to reading the file, she revealed the true scope of what she had known for decades. The adoption records contained detailed psychological evaluations, witness statements, medical reports documenting his catatonic state after the trauma, and, most importantly, information about his older brother who had survived the chainsaw attack but disappeared into the foster system. The file would have painted a clear picture of two severely traumatized children who had witnessed their mother's brutal dismemberment and sat in her blood for days. Any reasonable person reading those psychological assessments would understand that such extreme childhood trauma would create lasting psychological damage, potentially manifesting in violent behavior or a complete emotional detachment. Most significantly, the file contained Brian's real name and background information that would allow anyone to track his development through the foster care system. When the ice truck killer case dominated Miami headlines, Camilla would have immediately recognized Brian Moser as Dexter's missing brother. The connection between the two serial killers would have been impossible for her to miss. This revelation meant that Camilla had watched the entire ice truck killer investigation unfold while knowing that Dexter was hunting his own brother. She saw him working the crime scenes, analyzing evidence, and getting emotionally involved in the case, all while understanding the personal connection that no one else suspected. Her silence during this period proved her commitment to protecting Dexter regardless of circumstances. Her decision to read the file before destroying it demonstrated calculated curiosity about exactly what she was covering up. She wanted to understand the full scope of Dexter's psychological damage before committing to protecting him. After reading about his trauma, his brother's survival, and the predictions about their potential for violence, she chose to destroy the evidence. The timing of her confession was also particularly telling. She waited until she was dying to reveal this information, understanding that it was perhaps the most damning evidence of her complicity. She had carried this knowledge for over 30 years, watching Dexter develop into exactly the kind of killer the psychological evaluations had predicted, and never wavered in her protection. Her admission that she knew about Brian proved that she understood Dexter knew there were two damaged children from that massacre, and when one of them became a serial killer targeting Miami, she recognized the family connection immediately. Yet, she never warned anyone or tried to intervene. The file reading also explained why Camilla was so confident in her protection of Dexter throughout the years. She had clinical documentation of his psychological state and professional predictions about his likely development. She made informed decisions about enabling a potential killer based on comprehensive psychological evidence. Most of all, her willingness to destroy evidence after reading it proved that she believed Dexter's mission was more important than preventing the violence the files predicted. She chose to facilitate his development as a killer rather than seek help for a severely damaged child. But her knowledge would soon be put to the ultimate test when she made a request that only made sense if she knew exactly what Dexter was capable of. And I believe that reading that file convinced her that Dexter's path was inevitable, so she decided to help him rather than try to stop him. And that all led to one moment: asking Dexter to kill her. The most definitive proof that Camilla knew exactly what Dexter was came when she made the request that no one would ever make to an innocent man. She asked him to help her die. It was a calculated request made to someone she knew was capable of killing with compassion and precision. By season 3, Camilla was dying of lung cancer, her body ravaged by the disease and her spirit crushed by the inevitable progression towards a painful death. The medical treatments had failed, the prognosis was terminal, and she faced weeks or months of increasing agony before the cancer finally claimed her life. For most people, this would mean accepting hospice care, increasing pain medication, and hoping for a peaceful natural death. But Camilla had a different option available to her, one that required complete trust in someone's ability to kill without malice or cruelty. She had spent decades watching Dexter develop into exactly the kind of person who could provide what she needed, a merciful death delivered by someone who cared about her. When she brought up the subject with Dexter, her approach was careful but direct. She didn't dance around the topic or speak in euphemisms about helping her find peace. She specifically asked him to end her suffering because she knew he had both the capability and the emotional detachment necessary to perform such an act without being destroyed by guilt or remorse. Her comment about him not being Catholic revealed her understanding of his moral framework, or lack thereof. She knew that religious prohibitions against taking life wouldn't constrain him because he operated outside conventional moral boundaries. This was someone asking a killer to add one more death to his count, albeit for compassionate reasons. The request also demonstrated her complete trust in Dexter's precision and care. She wasn't afraid that he would botch the job, cause unnecessary pain, or approach the task with anything other than clinical efficiency. Her confidence in his abilities could only come from knowing exactly what he had done to others and how skillfully he had done it. Most tellingly, she never expressed any fear about making this request to him. There was no hesitation or concern that he might be shocked or horrified by what she was asking. She approached him as naturally as someone might ask a doctor for medication or a lawyer for legal advice. She was consulting a professional about services within his area of expertise. Her willingness to entrust her death to Dexter proved that she viewed his killing not as random violence or uncontrolled rage, but as precise, purposeful action that could be channeled towards compassionate ends when circumstances warranted it. She understood that his ability to take life could be a gift rather than a curse when applied to someone who was suffering unnecessarily. The request also revealed how completely she had accepted his true nature. She saw him as someone with unique capabilities that could serve beneficial purposes. Her moral framework has shifted so completely that she viewed mercy killings as a natural extension of his other activities. Her calm demeanor when making this request proved that she had long ago made peace with what Dexter was and what he did. She had normalized his violence so completely that she could request it for herself without any emotional distress. Now, drop a comment if you think that Camilla's final request was the ultimate proof that she knew everything all along. And when the moment came, she welcomed it with a smile. The most heartbreaking moment in Camilla's story came when she finally received what she called the perfect key lime pie from Dexter, the one laced with sodium pentothal that would end her suffering. Her reaction to eating this final dessert proved beyond any doubt that she knew exactly what was happening and welcomed it with complete peace of mind. Throughout her illness, Dexter had brought Camilla several key lime pies, each one rejected for various reasons. Too sweet, wrong texture, not quite right. She had specific standards that none of the previous offerings had met, but these rejections weren't really about culinary preferences. They were about timing, preparation, and her readiness for what the final pie would represent. When Dexter arrived with the last pie, everything about the interaction was different. The conversation was more intimate, more final, with both of them understanding that this visit marked the end of their decades-long relationship. Camilla's demeanor had shifted from the relentless discomfort of her previous days to something approaching serenity. As she took her first bite of the perfect pie, Camilla's immediate recognition that this one was different wasn't about flavor or preparation. The subtle change in her expression, the way she paused and looked at Dexter with understanding, revealed that she knew the pie contained something the others hadn't. This wasn't surprise or confusion, this was acknowledgement. Her continued eating, despite this recognition, was perhaps the most powerful evidence of her complete trust in Dexter's intentions. She didn't stop, didn't question what she was consuming, didn't express any fear about what would happen next. Instead, she savored each bite while maintaining eye contact with him, communicating her gratitude without words. The way she thanked him wasn't the casual appreciation someone shows for a thoughtful gift. Her tone carried weight, finality, and deep emotional significance that only made sense if she understood what he was giving her. She was thanking him, not just for the pie, but for the merciful death it would provide and the courage to deliver what she had asked for. As the sodium pentothal began taking effect, Camilla's responses became increasingly peaceful. She didn't fight the growing drowsiness or express confusion about what was happening to her. Instead, she seemed to welcome the gradual loss of consciousness as the answer to her prayers for release from unbearable pain. Her final moments of coherence were spent looking at Dexter with something approaching maternal pride. She had watched him grow from a damaged child into a man capable of providing exactly what she needed when she needed it most. Her smile wasn't drugged confusion. It was genuine satisfaction that her faith in him had been justified. The entire scene demonstrated how completely Camilla had accepted not just Dexter's nature, but the positive applications of his deadly skills. She didn't see this as a murder or even suicide. She saw it as a compassionate act performed by someone who understood suffering and knew how to end it efficiently and painlessly. Her peaceful consumption of the lethal pie proved that she had never feared Dexter or viewed him as a threat to innocent people. She understood that his violence was targeted, controlled, and could be channeled towards merciful purposes when circumstances warranted such action. The moment also revealed how their relationship had evolved over the decades from family friendship to something approaching professional collaboration. She had provided him with research and protection throughout his career, and now he was providing her with the specialized service only he could deliver. But it was her final words that left no room for doubt. "You're not like Brian." As the sodium pentothal began taking effect and Camilla drifted towards death, she delivered what might be the most damning evidence of her complete knowledge. She told Dexter that he was nothing like his brother Brian. It was a comparative analysis that could only come from someone who understood exactly what both men had become. Her comment revealed that she had been following Brian's development just as closely as she had monitored Dexter's progress over the years. When Brian Moser emerged as the ice truck killer, terrorizing Miami with his elaborate displays of dismembered bodies, Camilla immediately recognized him as the missing brother from Dexter's adoption file. She had watched his killing spree unfold in the news, while knowing his true identity and connections to Dexter. The fact that she could make such a definitive comparison between the two brothers proved that she understood their different approaches to violence. Brian's kills were theatrical performances designed to shock and terrorize the public, elaborate artistic displays that revealed his need for attention and recognition. His murders were chaotic, public spectacles that brought maximum media coverage and police attention. Dexter's kills, by contrast, were precise, private, and purposeful. His victims disappeared without fanfare, their deaths serving justice rather than ego. Where Brian sought attention and chaos, Dexter maintained secrecy and order. Camilla had observed these fundamental differences and concluded that Dexter's path, while still involving murder, was somehow more moral or justified than his brother's attention-seeking spree. Her reassurance that Dexter wasn't like Brian carried deeper implications about her moral framework. She was expressing approval for Dexter's approach while condemning Brian's. In her mind, there was a meaningful distinction between killing for justice and killing for attention, between targeted elimination of criminals and random displays of violence. The timing of this revelation was particularly significant. As she lay dying from poison that Dexter had given her, Camilla used her final conscious moments to reassure him that his brand of killing was acceptable, even admirable. She wasn't trying to dissuade him from violence. She was encouraging him to continue on his current path, rather than follow his brother's example. Her comment also revealed how long that she had been processing the psychological differences between the two traumatized children from the shipyard massacre. She had read their file, understood their shared origins, watched them develop into killers through different paths, and concluded that one was acceptable while the other was not. This moral distinction proved that Camilla had developed a sophisticated understanding of Dexter's code and methods. She recognized that his kills served a purpose beyond personal satisfaction, that his victims were chosen based on criteria beyond convenience or opportunity. She had essentially become a philosophical supporter of vigilante justice delivered by someone she considered qualified to make those life and death decisions. Her reassurance about Brian also demonstrated her protective instincts towards Dexter's psychological well-being. She understood that killing his brother had been difficult for him, and that she wanted to ensure that he didn't feel guilty about eliminating someone who had chosen a different, more destructive path. The comment served as both absolution and encouragement. She was forgiving him for Brian's death while simultaneously validating his continued activities. Her message was clear. Brian deserved to die because he was dangerous and chaotic, while Dexter deserved to live because he was controlled and purposeful. But her final words would provide the ultimate proof that she had always known the truth and never wavered in her support. I believe that her comparison of the brothers showed that she viewed Dexter as the good serial killer, someone whose violence served positive purposes rather than destructive ones. For decades, Camilla Fig helped hide the bodies, buried the evidence, and shielded him from discovery. She was in, and her final words weren't just absolution, they were permission. She didn't just know who Dexter was, she helped him stay that way. But she wasn't the only one who knew. Next up, Special Agent Lundy knew Dexter was a serial killer, whose investigation may have brought him dangerously close. Special Agent Lundy knew Dexter was a serial killer. He knew Dexter kept his boat at the same dock as the Bay Harbor Butcher, was aware that Dexter had tampered with a blood report on a criminal murdered by the Butcher, and never believed Dokes was the real killer. Throughout the entire season, it seems he knew more than he let on, which once again begs the question, did Lundy know Dexter was a serial killer? Given his reputation for being the best FBI detective in America, it seemed unlikely that a killer operating right under his nose would have gone unnoticed. In this video, I'm going to prove to you that Special Agent Lundy knew Dexter was a serial killer and explain how love, politics, the Trinity Killer, and his own beliefs kept him from acting on it. But first, we must properly understand Frank Lundy and the Bay Harbor Butcher case. Frank Lundy makes his debut in Season 2, Episode 2, when the FBI brings him in to lead Miami Metro's biggest case, the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation. With 18 victims, it was one of the most high-profile cases the city has ever seen, yet no one at Miami Metro suspected Dexter. Even before he appears on screen, Lundy is established as one of the best in his field, and someone Dexter should be worried about.
Any idea who the FBI is sending?
Some guy named Lundy.
Frank Lundy? He's a rock star. The Green River Killer, the DC sniper. If the case was impossible, he broke it.
From the start, we see him as a real threat, cracking what many saw as another impossible case. We're really shown this in his first press conference.
First report from the field had these parts as coming from one body.
Actually, it's two.
Actually, it's two.
Uh-oh.
Lundy is then assigned to assemble a task force for this case, handpicking only those he believed were best for the job. Dokes, a well-known figure at Miami Metro, approached Lundy after the conference, eager to join the task force. However, Lundy dismissed him without hesitation.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
But I don't think you'd be a good fit for my team.
I thought you just said I was qualified.
I said you'd done some fine work in homicide. Frankly, Sergeant, you're more of a leader than a team member. I'm not convinced you play well with others.
On the other hand, Lundy was adamant about Deborah joining the team, despite her reluctance due to low confidence after the ice truck killer ordeal.
You want me to find a serial killer? I was engaged to one, for Christ's sake. What kind of cop? What kind of...
That's why I chose you, you know.
Lundy's approach to both Dokes and Deborah highlights his bold, strategic, and often ruthless leadership. He dismisses Dokes without hesitation, shutting him down directly, while pushing Deborah just as firmly, but for the opposite reason. Now, you may be wondering how this is relevant, but this detail in his character is crucial to understanding whether Lundy knew the truth, so be sure to keep watching. The first interaction between Lundy and Dexter comes an episode later in An Inconvenient Lie, when Dexter steps into the field morgue surrounded by evidence of his own crimes. He gazes at them with nostalgia, reflecting on his work. Then, unexpectedly, Lundy appears, engaging him in a conversation about the case.
Some twisted set of principles.
They would have to be twisted, wouldn't they?
The worst killers in history are usually the ones who think the murders were somehow just.
He doesn't ask Dexter about forensic analysis. Instead, he discusses the psychology of the killer. Lundy speculates that the Bay Harbor Butcher operates by a twisted set of principles, eerily close to Dexter's own code. This exchange shows us how quickly Lundy gets inside the mind of the Bay Harbor Butcher, inside of Dexter's mind. Dexter justifies his killing with Harry's code, a lot. But that's not the only reason why this interaction is significant. As a renowned profiler, he also has the advantage of observing Dexter's unfiltered reaction to the killings in real time. It's hard to believe that someone as perceptive as Lundy wouldn't have noticed the nostalgia in Dexter's eyes and behavior, the subtle signs of a killer looking over his own work. This may not seem significant on its own, but when we consider the other points, then you'll see why the argument for Lundy knowing is so strong. They continue talking, and Dexter plays along, stating that there's never a justification for killing, but Lundy corrects him.
But there's never any justification for killing.
No. Well, one, of course. To save an innocent life.
This could explain why Lundy never exposed Dexter if he suspected the truth. Lundy believes killing is only justified when it protects the innocent, and in his own way, Dexter does just that, eliminating killers and inadvertently saving lives. As the Bay Harbor Butcher case gained traction, a key forensic discovery put Dexter at risk. Marine biologists discovered traces of a rare algae on the rocks used to weigh down the bodies, an algae that only grows in specific areas of Miami. This narrows down the investigation to a few potential dumping sites, including Coral Cove Marina, where Dexter docked his slice of life. Realizing the danger, Dexter sabotaged the morgue's cold storage, causing the bodies to decompose beyond analysis, but his relief was short-lived.
Anyway, good thing the heat didn't affect the rocks. Lundy had us store them separately.
The rocks?
Yeah, the algae we found on the rocks.
I have no idea how Dexter got away with lying for so long. I mean, he was so bad at it, to be honest. Eventually, though, they narrowed down their search to Coral Cove Marina, where Dexter keeps his boat, putting him under scrutiny as he matches one of the key factors in the Bay Harbor Butcher's profile. Up until this point, Lundy was still in the early stages of his investigation and had no clear suspect. However, once he discovered that Dexter has a boat at Coral Cove Marina, his interactions with him change ever so slightly. While Lundy doesn't outright treat Dexter as a suspect, there's a subtle shift in his demeanor, almost as if he's weary of him but remains professional out of courtesy. We see this play out soon after in the Dex Takes a Holiday, when Miami Metro receives a call from someone claiming to have been attacked by the Bay Harbor Butcher. Lundy is adamant about bringing Dexter along with him, suggesting an underlying suspicion or a desire to keep a close eye on him.
Rumor has it you have a knack for tracking serial killers.
I hear the same about you.
By this point, I'm sure Lundy has developed his own suspicions, so his words to Dexter are deliberate. He subtly tests him, recognizing that Dexter's knack for catching killers mirrors that of the Butcher. His remarks carry a dual meaning, hinting at suspicion while carefully observing Dexter's reactions. At the crime scene, he probes further, his investigative instincts telling him there's more to Dexter than that meets the eye.
If you were the Bay Harbor Butcher, would you use a place like this?
Actually, yes. Location-wise, it's not a bad choice. It's quiet, remote.
In another one of those questions that carries a veiled motive, Lundy is testing Dexter again. Throughout this tense scene, you can see Lundy analyzing him, comparing Dexter's demeanor to the profile of the Butcher he has in his head. This isn't definitive proof that he knows, but his suspicion is crucial to the entire theory, so stay with me. Also, if you're enjoying the video at this point, please subscribe. The following episode of Dexter submits a fake 32-page manifesto to the Miami Tribune in an attempt to slow down the investigation. It has the desired effect, and the department scrambles, with each member forming their own theories. But Lundy quickly realizes what's really happening.
He knows how we work. Look how he hits every major theme. Political, environmental, religious. He manages to weave together Julius Caesar, Berlin, Germany, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Gandhi. It's scattershot. He knew that this would send us scurrying like squirrels for nuts.
Yeah, but to suggest that he might be one of us, how can you be sure?
Lundy, always methodical and sharp, immediately recognizes the implications of the situation. It all points to someone with a law enforcement background. Acting on this suspicion, he orders the team to start investigating each other, a directive that unsettles everyone. The idea that one of their own could be the killer is difficult to accept, but Lundy knows it's a possibility they can't ignore. Determined to uncover the truth, he personally interviews members of Miami Metro, scrutinizing their backgrounds, behaviors, and potential connections to the case. When he calls Dexter into his office to discuss Anthony Rodrigo, one of the Butcher's victims, he wastes no time with formalities.
So, the Rodrigo case. Let's talk about that one.
Okay.
Kind of blew it, didn't you?
Lundy, well aware of Dexter's reputation as Miami Metro's top blood spatter analyst, is immediately unsettled when he discovers glaring errors in Dexter's blood work on the Rodrigo case, mistakes too obvious for someone of his skill. These small missteps allowed a killer to walk free. Lundy isn't just questioning the technical flaws, he's probing deeper, searching for their greater implications. Every word is calculated, every pause a test. He watches Dexter closely, waiting for hesitation, a slip, but Dexter stays composed. Yet Lundy's suspicion lingers, reinforcing that he sees Dexter as more than just another investigator. Deborah and Batista soon begin investigating Anthony Rodrigo's case, and their efforts take an unexpected turn when they uncover a crucial piece of evidence linking the Bay Harbor Butcher to Miami Metro itself. Assigned by Lundy to revisit the site, Deb and Batista track down Lenny Asher, a paranoid neighbor who obsessively documented everything he saw. Though eccentric, Lenny provides them with old notes from the night Rodrigo disappeared, including a crucial detail: a license plate number. Running the plate, they discovered that the car was registered to a drug dealer, Charlie Lewis. But there's a problem. Lewis had been arrested 4 days before Rodrigo vanished, and his vehicle was seized by Miami Metro. This means only law enforcement had access to that car that transported Rodrigo to his death.
The only people allowed access to those vehicles are members of the Miami Metro Police Department. Holy shit.
Bay Harbor Butcher is one of our own.
The revelation is chilling, and it's massive for 2 main reasons. First, the discovery confirms that the Bay Harbor Butcher is someone within law enforcement, intensifying the pressure on Dexter as the news tightens around Miami Metro. The idea that the killer has insider knowledge is no longer speculation, it's fact. This revelation means the FBI will scrutinize every officer, detective, and forensic analyst, leaving Dexter with fewer places to hide. More critically, it marks the first tangible, albeit circumstantial, link between Dexter and the Butcher. Until now, his sloppy blood work on the Rodrigo case, while suspicious, could be dismissed as human error. But with new evidence proving that Rodrigo was abducted using a Miami Metro seized vehicle, Dexter's forensic mistake is no longer just a blunder. It's a direct connection to the Butcher's actions. The implication is damaging. His supposed error allowed someone within Miami Metro to capture and kill Rodrigo, and with Dexter being the one responsible for the faulty analysis, it casts a dark shadow over him. If Lundy was truly the top-tier detective the show portrayed him as, then combined with Dexter's odd behavior, he likely would have made the connection by this point, or at the very least begun to suspect who Dexter really was. Anyways, his growing suspicions had begun to contrast sharply with his deepening relationship with Deb. Their connection, built on mutual respect and long nights spent working the case, had gradually turned romantic. Deb found herself drawn to his stability, a rare change from the chaos of her past relationships, while Lundy had come to appreciate her raw honesty. I believe this relationship, much like with Quinn, clouded his vision and judgment when it came to seeing who Dexter truly was, and we'll talk about that later, because Sergeant Dokes changed everything. After investigators discover a collection of blood slides hidden in Dexter's car at the airport, the FBI and Lundy officially designate him as the prime suspect in the Bay Harbor Butcher case. When the FBI brings Dexter in for questioning, he briefly panics, fearing they've uncovered his secret, but he quickly realizes they're focused entirely on Dokes.
I know this will come as a shock to you, Morgan, but our primary suspect is someone you know well.
Convinced they've unmasked the killer, they build their case around mounting circumstantial evidence: his history of violent outbursts, his sudden disappearance, and now the blood slides. To the FBI, this is irrefutable proof. With Dokes seemingly on the run and the evidence tying him directly to the murders, the case appeared closed. Dexter, seeing an unexpected way out, plays along.
I always sensed there was something off about him.
Whilst it's perfect for Dexter, Miami Metro is thrown into turmoil. While some are satisfied with the airtight case, others are not so sure. LaGuerta, having worked closely with Dokes for years, refuses to accept his guilt. She fights relentlessly to clear Dokes, proving he was on stakeouts during some murders, making it impossible for him to be the Butcher. But her evidence is dismissed due to her past relationship with him, rendering it inadmissible. Lundy refuses to reconsider, especially since Dokes had called her for help and she failed to act, further damaging her credibility. Lundy, though sympathetic, offers little more than a listening ear.
What really pisses me off is you might be right, but in trying to protect your friend, you blew the best shot we had at bringing him in from the cold.
This is massive because despite the overwhelming evidence against James Dokes, Frank Lundy was not entirely convinced that the case was as open and shut as it appeared. Unlike the rest of the FBI, which was eager to close the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, Lundy remained cautious, aware that something about Dokes' alleged guilt didn't sit right. When Maria LaGuerta approached him with concerns about Dokes' innocence again, he listened. She pointed out the inconsistencies in the timeline, arguing that Dokes couldn't have been responsible for some of the Butcher's kills, and informed him that an analyst in Port-au-Prince, Lyons, was willing to examine the blood slides. Rather than dismiss her outright, Lundy entertained the possibility, at least in private, that they might be wrong.
No, but it's worth looking into, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay.
For starters, why don't you brief me on both those missions?
His razor-sharp instincts had led him to major breakthroughs throughout his career, so the fact that he wasn't fully convinced Dokes was the Bay Harbor Butcher was significant. Despite the overwhelming evidence, something still didn't sit right with him, and the only real alternative to Dokes was Dexter. However, Lundy's skepticism wasn't enough to change the course of the investigation. With bureaucratic deputy director Max Adams eager to close the case, Lundy was sidelined. Ironically, no one knew Dokes was still alive, trapped in a cage by Dexter. This is why his death ultimately sealed the case, bringing the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation to a close. With Dokes' body found in the Everglades, burned beyond recognition in an explosion, the FBI considered the case solved. His death, coupled with Dexter's frame job, cemented his legacy as the Butcher in the eyes of law enforcement and the public. Miami Metro, despite some lingering doubts among certain members, moved forward, unwilling or unable to challenge the unofficial narrative. Meanwhile, those closest to the case felt the fallout. LaGuerta refused to accept Dokes' guilt, setting herself on a path that would ultimately lead to her downfall. Deb, despite her initial doubts, had no choice but to accept the FBI's conclusion, and Lundy, though highly intelligent, moved on from Miami with a rare blemish on his otherwise stellar record. He may have caught the Butcher, but the truth remained buried beneath layers of deception. So, did Lundy know Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher? I believe the answer is yes. Lundy had too many clues to ignore. He knew Dexter kept his boat at the Coral Cove Marina, a location tied to the Bay Harbor Butcher. He saw Dexter, one of Miami Metro's best forensic experts, botch blood work that led to a killer's release, only for that killer to be killed by the Butcher. And most importantly, although he said the overwhelming evidence pointed towards Dokes, he never explicitly said it was Dokes. And I think that's because he didn't believe it was Dokes. If Lundy didn't buy the Dokes narrative, the only real alternative was Dexter, given the circumstances of the cases. With his track record of catching killers like the Green River Killer and the DC Sniper, I find it hard to imagine he wouldn't have put these pieces together surrounding Dexter. I mean, Lundy identified Trinity with a single conversation, so I find it hard to believe that during his entire time in Miami in Season 2, he wouldn't have identified Dexter. So if he knew, why he do nothing about it? Well, there are a lot of factors to consider. One possibility is that Lundy silently approved. In their first interaction, he stated that the only justification for murder is saving an innocent life. If he suspected Dexter, he may have viewed him as a necessary force, eliminating killers and indirectly saving lives. Another possibility is that Lundy lacked concrete proof and wasn't willing to risk his career or his relationship with Deborah on a hunch. With nearly 30 years in the FBI, he was too smart to make baseless accusations, especially against someone Deb cared about. As a top investigator, he relied on evidence, not instinct, and accusing Dexter without proof could have cost him everything. Another possibility, often discussed, is that Lundy wanted Dexter's help in catching the Trinity killer. With over 279 victims, Trinity was one of the most prolific killers Lundy had ever pursued, and he may have seen Dexter as a valuable asset in bringing him down.
It really is kismet, you know?
Kismet?
Fate. I mean, if Trinity had struck in Buffalo instead of Miami, I wouldn't have access to a blood guy of your caliber.
It's another instance where Lundy says one thing but implies something deeper. Here, it feels like he's subtly asking Dexter to help him track and kill Trinity. If Lundy truly suspected Dexter, wouldn't he have done something? His obsession with catching serial killers never wavered, even in retirement. Just because he once justified murder in extreme cases doesn't mean that he would have condoned Dexter's code. Perhaps he saw Dexter as just another killer, but without solid evidence, he had no choice but to let it go. I think that if he hadn't been killed by Christine Hill in Season 4, Episode 4, I believe he would have eventually caught Dexter. But I guess we'll never know. At last, we have Detective Quinn knew Dexter was a serial killer, the most believable theory of all. Detective Joey Quinn knew Dexter's secret. From the police sketch of Kyle Butler, to the bags at sea, to the murder of Stan Liddy, to the framing of LaGuerta, the execution of Oliver Saxon by the end of Season 8, I can say with almost absolute certainty that Quinn knew Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher. Yet, despite knowing the truth, Quinn did nothing about it, which begs the question, why? In this video, I'm going to prove that Quinn knew Dexter was a serial killer and explain how a combination of fear, self-preservation, and love ultimately kept him from taking any action. In order to answer these questions, first we must unpack who Quinn actually was as a character. Quinn was introduced in Season 3 of the show, following his transfer from narcotics to homicide. He appears to be a fairly average cop, one with a long history in battling crime, and he immediately shows an interest in Deb.
Nice watch. Knockoff?
Me? No, real thing only. This old kid need to get it. I'll show you the scar sometime.
I'll give you a kidney not to.
However, with the introduction of Yuki Amato, it's almost immediately made clear to us that Quinn is in some way shady, or at the very least, highly questionable. Yuki, Quinn's former partner in narcotics and now an internal affairs officer, appears determined to bring him down. While her motives seem personal and relentless, the exact reasons behind her vendetta remain unclear. At first, Yuki targets Officer Deborah Morgan, attempting to manipulate her into becoming an informant against Quinn. She dangles the enticing promise of a detective's badge as a reward for cooperation, while also threatening to withhold if Deborah refuses. Despite the pressure, Deborah stands her ground and refuses to be a rat.
Oh no, understand me. When I say you have the wrong person, I mean me. These people are more than just badge numbers to me. They're my friends. They're my family.
For much of the season, Yuki remains relentless, persistently harassing Deborah through phone calls, text messages, and unannounced confrontations, as she goes as far as to threatening Deborah's reputation by implying she will expose their private conversations. Deborah eventually tells Quinn about the investigation, leading him to take action to stop Yuki's inquiry. In a final showdown at the station, Yuki reveals her grudge comes from Quinn's indirect involvement in a police officer's death.
The cop's dead because Quinn cut all the wrong corners. I came to you for help to get him out of circulation. You refused. Next dead cop's on you.
Quinn argues that the situation was complicated, but it shows his tendencies to bend the rules when he sees it. It paints him as a cop who operates in gray areas, one who's willing to look the other way. His shady side is developed further in Season 4 when Quinn becomes interested in Christine Hill, a determined reporter and the daughter of Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. Covering the Lisa Bell case, Trinity's first on-screen victim, Christine flirts with Quinn to get information, and Quinn, being the absolute professional that he is, hands over his number. Quinn meets Christine again later and, in another breach of police confidentiality, shares details about the vacation murders, which she quickly uses to publish an article. Him doing this violated the rules and professional boundaries expected of a detective. When Maria reads the article, she tells Quinn to quit the pillow talk, reminding him of the dangers. As expected, Quinn ignores the warnings and continues his relationship with Christine, sharing details about Miami's Metro's biggest cases. During an intimate moment, he reveals key information about the Trinity Killer investigation, including Lundy's theory,
because Super Agent Lundy has a hunch that the dead woman is connected to this big serial killer case.
The information allowed Christine to stay one step ahead in protecting her father and ultimately contributed to her decision to shoot and kill Agent Lundy and seriously injure Deb. Christine acted to protect her father, the Trinity Killer, but Quinn's carelessness made it easier for her to do so. While he couldn't have known her true identity or her violent intentions, he is still somewhat responsible. Police confidentially exist to stop things like this from happening, but Quinn didn't seem to care. He broke the rules and handed Christine sensitive details, which she exploited by taking violent actions against those close to breaking the case. If Quinn had done his job properly and kept quiet, the Trinity Killer may have been caught earlier and Lundy might still be alive. His behavior once again proved that he was a lousy cop as he prioritized personal pleasure and gratification over his duty to uphold the law. Quinn's irresponsible nature as a cop is epitomized when Dexter catches him stealing from a crime scene, an event that sparked a personal vendetta and leads Quinn to start investigating Dexter. During an investigation, Quinn is tasked with inventorying the victim's belongings, including a safe full of cash. Of course, he doesn't do this. While Dexter, distracted by his own problems, collects evidence nearby, Quinn opens the safe using the victim's birth date as the code. He pockets some of the cash before cataloging the rest. Quinn notices Dexter watching the theft, and for a moment, their eyes meet in tense silence. He quickly pulls himself together, not realizing Dexter doesn't really care.
Don't sweat it, Quinn. I've got much bigger things to worry about.
At this point in the show, Quinn's shady tendencies are impossible to ignore, covering for a drug-addicted officer, leaking sensitive case details to Christine Hill, and pocketing money from a crime scene, all revealing a cop willing to break rules whenever it suits him. This is essential in understanding why Quinn stayed out of Dexter's way. The law didn't flow through his veins like it did for LaGuerta or Dokes. He wasn't the type of person to risk his life in the name of justice. By this point, we are led to see Quinn as a highly street-smart individual with a knack for analyzing dangerous and complex situations. His resourceful shadiness not only reinforces his sharp instincts, but also foreshadows his eventual decision to steer clear of Dexter. Quinn's ability to read people is evident in how he earns Anton's trust and skillfully deflects scrutiny from internal affairs. This intuitive understanding of when to push and when to back off highlights his self-preservation instincts. It also mirrors his later approach to Dexter, but we'll get onto that. At the point where Quinn steals from the crime scene, tensions between the two were already high, as Dexter had messed up a case Quinn was working on by bringing the wrong files to court. But Quinn decided to let it go and try to make friends with Dexter, most likely to neutralize any threat. He begins with casual conversation and later tries to win Dexter over by offering him very expensive tickets to a Dolphins game.
Help me out here, Dexter. I've been going out of my way trying to make things good with you, but no matter what I do, you just throw it back in my face.
You don't need to make things good with me.
Come on. What's it gonna take?
Then I don't care if you're a dirty cop.
But Dexter is not at all interested. Quinn takes the rejection personally, marking a significant turning point in their relationship, as Quinn starts to view Dexter with growing distrust and suspicion. You know, when you start disliking someone, you begin to see everything they do in a negative light. Well, that's exactly what happened with Quinn, and for the rest of the season, he became increasingly suspicious of Dexter, finally noticing his strange behavior. The relationship grows increasingly tense and confrontational.
That all you got?
That's all I can tell you.
Dex. Hey, buddy.
Keep walking, not in the mood.
Half day?
This is called lunch, buddy.
Off campus as usual.
On one occasion, when Dexter is chasing a lead on Trinity, Quinn goes off on him, resulting in him being thrown to the floor.
What, when you're done chasing tail?
You do not want to question my loyalty to my family, Quinn. Not today. Do your fucking job.
Quinn's suspicions reach a climax when Rita is killed by the Trinity killer. It was already strange that she was targeted, as she did not fit the typical profile of his victims, making her murder an anomaly in his established ritual. Quinn begins to piece this together, noticing the irregularities in Trinity's methods and how they oddly intersect with Dexter's life. Dexter's emotionless reaction to Rita's death doesn't help. While those around Dexter grieve, his flat, detached demeanor stands out, especially for someone who just lost his wife in such a violent and tragic way. In the moments following the discovery, Dexter's shock causes his carefully crafted facade to slip, exposing a callous coldness that doesn't align with the grieving husband he's expected to be. Quinn is the first to notice this.
Midway up her right thigh, dissecting her femoral artery.
Habit of precision.
His wife just died. He's submitting a lab report. Seriously, the next door neighbor, the guy with the, forehead, he was more broken up about Rita than Dexter was.
In Season 5, we see a drastic change in Quinn's character development. He starts to show a deeper interest in Deborah after they sleep together at Dexter and Rita's home, which is wrong in so many ways, but that's a completely different video. Deborah regrets the encounter right away, but Quinn sees potential for a relationship and continues to pursue her over time. As time passes, Deborah begins to warm up to him and eventually reciprocates his feelings. At the same time, Quinn begins to piece a theory together about Rita's murder. Dexter's lack of emotion, his strange behavior during the 911 call, and the fact that Rita's death didn't match Trinity's MO raises red flags for Quinn. He learns that Rita had kissed her neighbor, Elliot, and that Dexter knew about it. Quinn starts to think that Dexter might have killed Rita in a jealous rage, framed Trinity, and staged the crime scene to mimic Trinity's style, given his familiarity with the case. Things escalate when Quinn sees a police sketch of a man connected to Trinity, someone named Kyle Butler. He notices the man in the sketch looks a lot like Dexter, and his curiosity grows when he finds out the person with the same name had been murdered shortly before Rita's death. Determined to get answers, Quinn secretly follows an FBI agent to the safe house where Trinity's family is staying, hoping to confirm his suspicion that Dexter is actually Kyle Butler. However, his investigation takes an unexpected turn when he confronts Trinity's son, Jonah, at the store and tries to show him a photo of Dexter. Before Jonah can respond, Quinn is caught by the FBI and taken away. To shield the department from potential fallout, LaGuerta decides to suspend him. At this point, Quinn doesn't know that Dexter is a serial killer, but he senses something dark about him. While his earlier suspicions were weak and largely fueled by personal bias, this time he had a legitimate reason to doubt the true nature of Dexter. And that's when he gets involved with Stan Liddy. Liddy, a corrupt narcotics cop caught in a sting operation but later released, is introduced as a morally dubious character. His shady nature resonates with Joey Quinn, and the two connect at a bar where Quinn reveals his interest in investigating Dexter. Although Liddy criticizes Quinn for being involved with Deb, he becomes intrigued and agrees to look into Dexter, highlighting how both men were willing to bend the rules when it suits their agenda. Quinn hopes to uncover maybe an affair or a link between Dexter and Rita's death, but he has no idea what he's getting himself into. Liddy begins noticing how meticulously Dexter hides his tracks. He points out Dexter's overly clean background and his almost obsessive need for control and secrecy, traits eerily similar to those observed by Sergeant Dokes.
Your boy's squeaky clean on paper. He's only been out of the country once, Paris, pays his bills on time, keeps to himself. I tell you, it's all too neat and a little too phony.
As Liddy continues his investigation, he discovers that Lumen Pierce is living in Dexter's old house. To gather more information, he stages a fake car accident involving Lumen. During the encounter, he notices suspicious items in her possession, including rolls of plastic sheeting and garbage bags, tools consistent with the Bay Harbor Butcher's MO. These discoveries deepen Liddy's suspicions and push him to pursue the case with even more determination. Liddy's investigation takes a darker turn when he stalks Dexter and photographs Dexter and Lumen dumping suspicious bags into the ocean, another stage in the Bay Harbor Butcher's MO. He speculates that the bags might contain drugs, or worse, bodies. By this point, Quinn's enthusiasm for the investigation has waned. He shows no interest in seeing the photos Liddy has taken. However, we later see he keeps them in his bedside table. Deborah had recently confronted Quinn about his investigation into Kyle Butler, and his growing feelings for her make him question his motives. He starts to view pursuing Dexter as a risk to his relationship with Deborah, and as a result, Quinn steps back, leaving Liddy to continue the investigation alone, unrestrained and increasingly reckless.
Yeah. Consider this your severance package. We're done.
As Liddy continues gathering evidence, his obsession escalates. He forges Quinn's signature to obtain police surveillance equipment and sets up hidden cameras in Dexter's apartment, capturing footage of Dexter and Lumen handling knives. Eventually, Liddy manages to capture Dexter and trap him in his surveillance van, emboldened by the hope of reviving his career. Using illegally obtained photos and videos as leverage, he attempts to intimidate Dexter, offering to leave Lumen out of it if Dexter confesses to his crimes. Liddy plans for Quinn to make the bust for him. However, Liddy's growing desperation blinds him to the danger he's facing, clouding his judgment at a critical moment. Liddy starts filming Dexter's confession, but things quickly spiral out of control. Despite being tied up, Dexter kicks Liddy in the face, knocking him into the van's front seat. Liddy grabs a knife and tries to stab Dexter, but Dexter fights back, turning the blade towards Liddy. Slowly, the knife sinks into Liddy's chest. He tries to resist, but his eyes widen in shock as he grows weaker. Moments later, he dies. Shortly after, Quinn arrives at the location where he believes Liddy has Dexter cornered. He finds only an empty surveillance van with no sign of Liddy or Dexter. Frustrated and uneasy, Quinn leaves angry voicemails for Liddy, demanding answers. He gets none. Just as he leaves, a drop of blood falls on his foot. Liddy is pronounced dead, and Quinn, along with Dexter, are called to the crime scene. And I think at this point, Quinn is starting to consider that Dexter was responsible.
What about you? Any theories? I haven't examined the crime scene. Wild guess.
Heard Liddy was kind of shady. Maybe something came back to bite him.
His response is calm, almost chilling, offering vague statements that conclude with a veiled threat. The thinly veiled warning lands, and Quinn visibly backs off, unnerved. His queasy expression and hesitant reply make it clear he understands the gravity of Dexter's words, and decides to let the matter rest. Quinn here looks visibly scared. Do you think he knew at this point? Comment down below. Upon arriving at the scene, they discovered that Liddy, a cop with over 40 years of experience, had been killed with precision, clearly by someone highly skilled. Killed in the same spot Quinn last knew him to be with Dexter. Deborah asks Quinn what's bothering him, and his response shows the dilemma in his mind.
What is it?
I don't know how to say it.
It's unclear whether Quinn avoids confronting Deb about her brother's dark side because he fears the fallout of their relationship and worries about the legal consequences for himself, or is afraid of what Dexter might do if provoked. Most likely, it's a combination of all these factors weighing heavily on him. There's no evidence left behind except for Quinn's incriminating voicemails and the blood on his shoe. Quinn isn't exactly sure how the blood got there, although I'm sure he may have suspected Dexter might have planted it to implicate him. Regardless, it's clear to Quinn that Dexter is involved. At this point, Quinn must have known that Dexter had killed Liddy, and I'm sure his next train of thought was that he was the Bay Harbor Butcher. The plastic wrapping, the dumping of the bodies at sea were all consistent with the Bay Harbor Butcher's MO, and now Liddy was dead. I personally find it highly unlikely that Quinn, the highly street-smart cop, wouldn't have pieced it together by this point. Some might argue that it's unlikely that Quinn would suspect Dexter of being the Bay Harbor Butcher at this point, but I just find that nearly impossible to believe. The Bay Harbor Butcher's case, arguably one of the biggest in Miami's history and involving Miami Metro's own, would have been common knowledge. It's almost certain that Quinn was familiar with the case, making it likely he noticed the similarities between its details and the evidence that Liddy had uncovered. So it's not a stretch to say that he made the connection. Quinn is arrested, but stays silent about his connection to Liddy. He doesn't want to hurt Deb by accusing Dexter, knows that he'd sound crazy if he did, and is likely scared of what Dexter might do if pushed. In an unexpected turn of events, Quinn is released after Dexter's analysis clears him. Quinn realizes that Dexter lied to exonerate him, all but confirming Dexter's involvement in Liddy's murder. Relieved to avoid prison, Quinn even thanks Dexter for saving him, effectively putting an end to any lingering suspicions he may have had.
Thank you.
For what?
The blood work.
Just doing my job.
Yeah, well, that was the one thing hanging me up. There you are.
From this point forward, the dynamic between Dexter and Quinn shifts significantly. While Dexter remains private and guarded, Quinn becomes much less aggressive towards him, treating him with greater respect. He no longer openly criticizes or questions Dexter, signaling a complete change in his attitude and a decision just to back off completely. There could have been several reasons for Quinn's change in behavior. His growing relationship with Deb likely made him hesitant to do anything that might jeopardize it. He may have also felt like he owed Dexter some sort of courtesy after helping clear him. However, on a deeper level, I believe that Quinn's attitude shifted because he was genuinely afraid of Dexter and uncertain about what he might be capable of. Subscribe if you think that Quinn knew at this point. If you're not still convinced that Quinn knew that Dexter was a serial killer, then all we need to do is to fast forward to season 7 when Maria LaGuerta begins to suspect Dexter. After finding a blood slide at the scene of the Travis Marshall murder, LaGuerta begins to suspect that the Bay Harbor Butcher is still active and that Dopes was framed. Growing increasingly suspicious of Dexter, she devises a risky plan to catch him. She arranges for Hector Estrada, the man who ordered Dexter's mother's murder, to be released from prison, hoping Dexter's need for vengeance will lead him into her trap. However, Dexter proves just as cunning. He quickly realizes LaGuerta's plan and devises a counter-strategy to discredit and frame her, turning her investigation into both a professional and personal catastrophe. When LaGuerta arrests Dexter for the murder of Hector Estrada, she is confident she has finally exposed the real Bay Harbor Butcher. She confronts him publicly in front of her colleagues, presenting what she claims is undeniable evidence: Estrada's wallet and a bloody shirt recovered from Dexter's boat. However, Dexter had already anticipated her move and set the stage to turn the tables. New evidence emerges revealing that the bloody shirt is tied to an old sealed case file and that Dexter's fingerprints are nowhere to be found on the wallet. Instead, LaGuerta's fingerprints are discovered, making her appear as a rogue officer desperate enough to fabricate evidence in an attempt to clear her friend's name.
Are you trying to frame my brother?
Dad.
You son of a bitch. You set me up.
Maria.
By this point, Quinn had witnessed enough to piece together the truth about Dexter. He's seen Dexter dump bodies at sea, eliminate Liddy without leaving a trace, and now has seen Dexter completely turn a case against the police captain, even managing to implicate her in the process. This evidence that Quinn has points to the fact that Dexter is someone who knows what he's doing. Then, as if by design, LaGuerta ends up dead. It's hard to believe that Quinn hasn't realized that Dexter is the Bay Harbor Butcher, or at the very least, a highly competent killer at this point. Dexter dumping bodies at sea, killing Liddy without leaving a trace, flipping the case against LaGuerta and her sudden death, it just pointed more and more to the fact that Dexter was a serial killer. Later on in season 8, when Quinn and Dexter go to stake out Zach Hamilton, a young boy they think is involved in a murder, they strike up a rare conversation.
You dig deep enough on anyone in this department, you know what you find?
What?
This shit. It's there. I mean, we all got it. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. We've all got this shit.
Quinn eventually begins questioning Dexter about why Deb confessed to killing LaGuerta, hinting that he knows more than he's letting on. Though he never states it outright, Quinn indirectly implies through veiled comments and riddles that he's aware Dexter is a serial killer, and that Deb was involved in LaGuerta's death.
I know you know what I'm talking about.
It's absolutely clear that at this point, Quinn has pieced everything together. Later in the episode, when Quinn catches Dexter stalking Zach, this time for his table, not Miami Metro, he acts like what Dexter is doing isn't insanely weird.
Hey, I know what you're doing.
Quinn.
You playing detective? Watching Zach?
Yeah, you caught me.
I'm going to see Jamie. Keep an eye on Zach.
Here, Quinn finds Dexter in his kill clothes, wearing gloves, at nighttime, keeping an eye on Zach. It's almost comedic. Quinn pretends not to notice what Dexter is really doing, but it's obvious he knows. Without saying it directly, he lets Dexter know that he knows what he's doing and has no plans to stop him. A very smart choice. So now you might be asking, why Quinn did nothing about it? Well, imagine what's going on through Quinn's mind. If Dexter is the Bay Harbor Butcher, then he managed to frame Dokes, a highly trained ex-Special Force operative, right under the FBI's nose, take down Trinity, one of the most elusive and dangerous serial killers in US history, kill Liddy, a former cop who had the upper hand without leaving a trace of evidence, frame and kill Maria LaGuerta, a police captain, as soon as she started closing in on him, all while keeping up the perfect image of a devoted father, brother, and blood splatter analyst. I mean, can you imagine how terrifying that must have been? Who would Quinn be to stand in Dexter's way? We know Quinn is smart enough to understand that he's completely out of his depth, and his safest option is to keep his distance and avoid interfering. Quinn isn't the type of guy who would feel compelled to turn Dexter in. He's a shady cop with a history of questionable behavior. He's covered for drug-addicted officers, leaked sensitive police information to the press, and even stolen money from crime scenes. And that's not all. In season 7, we also learned that he took bribes from the Koshka Brotherhood while working in narcotics. Do you think turning a blind eye to Dexter's activities to save his own skin would be beyond him? The answer is no. Most cops would pursue Dexter out of a genuine belief in law and justice, but not Quinn. Partly because he's not someone who cares deeply about those ideals, and partly because he's smart enough to know when to back off. And for that, I kind of like him. Quinn's reluctance to pursue Dexter is deeply tied to his love for Deborah. His feelings for her create a significant conflict of interest, as going after Dexter would not only risk the relationship, but also devastate Deb emotionally. When Deb found out that Quinn was investigating a connection between Kyle Butler and Dexter, the relationship almost ended. Quinn, madly in love, did not want a repeat of that. I also think that he didn't pursue Dexter because on some twisted level, he kinda agreed with the Bay Harbor Butcher's principle, killing other killers. In season 7, Quinn becomes involved with Nadia, a dancer at the Foxhole. As their bond grew, Quinn found himself increasingly entangled with the dangerous Koshka Brotherhood. The situation came to a head where George, a violent Koshka member, began using Nadia to manipulate Quinn. George's control over her escalated to physical abuse, culminating in a confrontation where he dragged Nadia into his office, struck her, and dismissed Quinn's warnings. Realizing the threat that George posed to Nadia's life, Quinn acted decisively, shooting George in the chest. To protect Nadia and himself, Quinn staged the scene as self-defense, even having Nadia shoot him in the arms to sell the story. He urged her to flee, knowing the Koshkas would kill her if she stayed. Here, we see Quinn take the life to protect an innocent person, a decision that will align with the principles of the Bay Harbor Butcher. Given Quinn's character and his willingness to operate in moral gray areas, it's not a stretch to imagine that he wouldn't oppose the killing of true monsters in society and thus again turn a blind eye to Dexter's killings. Later, when Dexter kills Oliver Saxon, the surveillance footage reveals a bizarre sequence of events. What starts as a seemingly ordinary conversation escalates quickly. Dexter provokes Saxon to stab him with a pen, and Dexter responds by stabbing him in the neck with a level of precision and efficiency only a seasoned killer could have. His calm demeanor and the way he takes an extra moment to revel in the act before slipping back into character makes the entire thing unsettling to watch. As Batista watches the footage, he's in disbelief. He is in shock that Dexter, the loving father, mild-mannered blood splatter analyst, and trusted friend could be capable of such calculated violence. Quinn, however, is completely calm, partly because he's still grieving Deb's stroke, but also he's not surprised by Dexter's ability to kill, as he already knows what Dexter is capable of. Without hesitation, Quinn steps in and calls the incident clear self-defense, quickly shutting down Batista's doubts.
It's obviously self-defense.
The way Quinn says it comes off almost as sarcastic, as if Dexter's efficiency in taking Saxon's life is no surprise to him. Therefore, it's only plausible to conclude that he knew. And yeah, that's it. In the end, it's clear that Quinn knew Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher and a serial killer. Throughout the series, he saw enough to figure it out. Dexter dumping bags at sea, killing Stan Liddy, framing both Dokes and LaGuerta, stalking Zach Hamilton, killing Oliver Saxon. Yeah, he most definitely knew. But despite all this, Quinn chose not to act, and his reasons reflect who he was as a person and as a cop. Unlike LaGuerta or Dokes, Quinn was never a cop who cared deeply about justice or upholding the law. He operated in gray areas, often bending or ignoring the rules when it suited him. Quinn was pragmatic, and pursuing someone as dangerous and as skilled as Dexter, a man who has outsmarted the FBI, killed with precision, and framed LaGuerta so convincingly that it ruined her reputation before her death, was simply not worth the risk to him. After LaGuerta's death, it's hard to imagine that Quinn didn't fully realize that Dexter was a serial killer. In fact, it's certain he knew. He saw how Dexter manipulated the case against her, and likely understood that her sudden, suspicious death was not a coincidence. However, Quinn wasn't driven by the same passion for justice as other cops. He was smart enough to know when to stay out of something that could cost him his career or his life. On some level, Quinn may have even agreed with Dexter's principles, having killed George to protect Nadia and staged the scene to cover it up. Quinn likely understood the moral reasoning behind eliminating dangerous people who couldn't be stopped by the law. Ultimately, the main reasons Quinn stayed silent were his self-preservation, his lack of commitment to justice, and his love for Deborah. Confronting Dexter would have risked their relationship and caused her immense pain, something Quinn wasn't willing to do, especially after their relationship nearly fell apart when she caught him investigating Dexter. By the time Dexter killed Oliver Saxon, Quinn's reaction made it clear that he had accepted the truth. While Batista was shocked by the footage, Quinn calmly dismissed it as clear self-defense, showing no surprise at Dexter's ability to kill. While he might have agreed with Dexter's actions on some level, it was his pragmatism, his detachment from justice, and his desire to protect his own life and relationships that kept him from acting. Quinn wasn't a hero, nor did he try to be. He was simply someone who knew when to step aside from a fight he couldn't win. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video about Dexter's kill ritual.